the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GBNews.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only three people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Akua, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's on your teeth.
It's on your teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next 3 hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me in the next hour, broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly, and also broadcaster and author Christine Hamilton. In a few moments, we'll be going head-to-head in a clash of minds with GB News senior commentator Nigel Nelson and also former Conservative Special Advisor Claire Pearsall. Right, but before we get stuck in, let's get your latest news headlines with Sophia.
Good afternoon, it's 3 o'clock. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Reports say the Israel government has received the list of hostages who are expected to be released today. An official told The Times of Israel that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office are notifying the families. It is the third day of a 4-day truce, which Qatar says it hopes will be extended further with the release of more captives. Meanwhile, smoke can be seen at the Gaza border. 9-year-old Irish-Israeli girl Emily Hand has been reunited with her father following her release by Hamas late last night. She is among 17 hostages freed by the terrorist group after 50 days in captivity. 13 Israelis, 6 women and 7 children, along with 4 Thai nationals, were transported out of Gaza through the Rafah border crossing. They've now been reunited with their families in Israel.
Hand is a closure for me because, unfortunately, I'm the one who told her father that she has been found murdered. And a week later, I'm the one who told the father that she probably captured. So it's a kind of a relief for me that she's still alive, she's here, she's with us, and I have to tell his father to give him a hug.
CEO of Safra Children's Hospital at the Sheba Medical Centre, Professor Ete Pasak, discussed the treatment of the newly freed women and children.
I'm happy to say that despite the fact that the harsh conditions they have been under and the experience of captivity, they did not require any emergent medical intervention. We will keep them here at the Edmond Hillary Safra Children's Hospital for as long as they need and care for them, help them in their preparation of coming back to their communities.
39 Palestinians have been released from a prison in the West Bank in exchange for the Israeli hostages. Hundreds of Palestinians welcomed their return in the early hours of this morning. Crowds cheered, clapped and waved flags in the streets as they arrived in buses. It's understood the group includes 6 women and 33 children. Boris Johnson has told GB News anti-Semitism is like a virus which lurks beneath the floorboards of Western civilization. The former Prime Minister is attending a march in central London standing against anti-Jewish racism. It comes amid concerns over rising tensions across the UK, sparked by the conflict in Gaza. Director of Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, Stephen Silverman, told GB News what the march hopes to achieve.
Jews feel under threat. Jews feel in danger. They feel like they've been abandoned by some of the institutions that should be there to defend them. What today is about is for Jewish people to say, no, we will not accept this. But not just Jewish people, for their very, very many friends and allies and supporters to stand with them in this and say this is not what the UK is about. This does not represent UK values, which are of tolerance and acceptance of all ethnicities and minorities.
Former England manager Terry Venables has died at the age of 80. His family released a statement saying, "We are totally devastated by the loss of a wonderful husband and father who passed away peacefully yesterday after a long illness." Venables was in charge of England's men's national team between 1994 and 1996. Footballer Gary Lineker paid tribute, saying he was much, much more than just a great manager. He was vibrant, he was charming, he was witty, he was a friend. This is GB News across the UK, on TV, in your car, on your digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now let's return to Nana.
Hello, good afternoon. It is fast approaching 6 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, before we go head-to-head, let me introduce you again to my panel. My head-to-head is GB News senior commentator Nigel Nelson, also former Conservative Special Advisor Claire Pearsall. They'll be going head-to-head in a clash of minds in a few moments' time. On the menu, 17 hostages containing 13 Israelis and 4 Thai nationals have been freed by Hamas. As further negotiations take place, I'll be speaking to Israeli journalist Shotan Confino live in Tel Aviv in just a moment. By banning marches, I'm going to be asking, are we at risk of limiting our freedom of speech? A lot of people keep saying it's freedom of speech, freedom of speech. You've seen it, though, the pro-Palestine demonstrators, they defied police's warnings, with some of them carrying banners with anti-Semitic hate speech on it. But is it time to ban future marches of this nature from taking place? And are we at risk, if we do that, of limiting our freedom of speech? Also, who do you most trust with immigration? The Tory party or Labour? We've given you the two. I mean, there are others, but these are the two front runners at the moment. Rishi Sunak has vowed to clamp down on immigration, but is facing an uphill battle with an illegal Rwanda plan and a record net migration figure. Meanwhile, Sir Keir Starmer is facing claims that Labour's immigration plans would increase asylum seeker numbers. So who do you trust the most with it? And I loved it this morning when I got up. I loved the cold. It was beautiful. The cold snap. It's nearing. Should the government subsidise our energy bills, which actually means you and I paying for them later? The the Met Office even have warned of potential for significant snowfall, with temperatures plunging to -5, with warnings of ice on roads and heavy frost. Now, this comes as households are set to pay more than any winter before on their energy bills. So I'm asking, as the cold snap nears, should the government subsidise our energy bills? And an interview you will not want to miss at 5. My outside guest now for today is a founding member of a famous 90s British all-female dance troupe. Do you remember? Who do you think she is? She'll be there later at 5. That's coming up in the next hour. As ever, tell me what you think on everything we're discussing. Email gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at gbnews. So, of course, the top story today is Israel. The government have been given a list of hostages who are set to be released. The Times of Israel are reporting that Israel's Prime Minister has notified the families whose loved ones who are on the list as Israel and Hamas observe the third day of a 4-day truce. Now, this follows the 13 hostages released by Hamas in exchange for 39 prisoners. So joining me for more updates is the Israeli journalist Shotan Confino. Shotan, thank you very much for joining me. Shotan, first of all, what's the mood like in Israel? Because more hostages are being released.
I would say a lot of anxiety, because nobody really trusts Hamas, and especially after yesterday when everything was about to explode, when Hamas withdrew from the hostage release deal at the very last minute, then changed their mind a few hours later. Everyone here is just anxious, and they don't trust them until the hostages are being brought by the Red Cross from Gaza across the border into Egypt. Nobody thinks of them as being saved.
Now, I've heard quite a few reports, and this isn't my view, but I've heard a few reports of people saying that the people being released from Israel are not prisoners, as it were, but people who are being detained. Is there any truth to any of this?
That is true. There is a list of 300 Palestinians, some of whom are in prison in administrative detention. That's what it's called. But the majority of them are either convicted or on trial. It's not as if it's just 300 people that Israel has taken and thrown into jail and keeping them hostage in some sort of way, as I've heard people suggest. It is far from the truth. Many of them are members of Hamas and Islamic Jihad. Many of them have attempted manslaughter. Some of them have stabbed police officers. It ranges really with different kinds of crimes, different kinds of age also, of course. So yes, but in short, some of them in administrative detention, which is a controversial method, but a lot of them also convicted criminals.
All right, thank you for answering that. That clears quite a bit up. Now, I also wanted to ask you with regard to the list of the hostages, is that a list that's gone public yet, or is that one that is just staying under the radar and just with the families for now?
Yeah, it's only for the families for now, mainly to protect them. And I know that the media here are obviously very interested in knowing who they are. There are some rumors, but we've been told to to keep mum and to not start speculating and to start talking about it too much, simply because, again, we don't know what's going to happen. If it falls through at the very last minute, the families will be devastated. But we did hear Hamas actually announce not too long ago that a Russian citizen will be released after the efforts, they said, by Vladimir Putin. They praised him. They have a good relationship with him. So a Russian citizen, apparently, and also we heard the U.S. National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, saying that they hope that the 4-year-old American girl held hostage by Hamas will also be on this list.
And finally, have any of the hostages spoken about their experience and said what it was like? And if they have, what have they said?
Yeah, they have spoken a little bit about what they've experienced. They said they were sleeping on some sort of plastic chairs. The food was very scarce. They were eating rice and pita bread mostly. And they were guarded by Hamas terrorists who made signs to them as if they were going to behead them, apparently. So not good conditions as we expected. But most of them...
Sorry, where were they? Were they in tunnels, did they say? Were they...
They were kept underground, as we understand it, in some sort of a tunnel network. This is what we've expected all along, because this is how Hamas is hiding. This is how they are protecting themselves from Israeli airstrikes. So this is basically what we also assumed. And one of the first hostages that was released also said this, that it was a spider web of tunnels that she was kept in. So this all really is just confirming what we knew all along.
Well, Yotam, thank you very much for your thoughts. That's Yotam Confino live from Israel. The pictures we were showing you just there were pictures outside a prison in the West Bank, because presumably some of those prisoners will be released from there. Let's get some analysis from the international security expert, Henry Bolton. Henry, what does this hostage exchange mean for the war between Israel and Hamas?
Nana, hello, good afternoon. Not necessarily very much. Obviously, for the families involved, it's massive, and that has a political implication for Israel. But also, think of it this way, I'd like to remind everybody that, yes, hostages, and we're all glad that they're being released gradually, or some of them, but let's remember how Hamas came to be in possession of these hostages through that appalling, depraved terrorist attack on the 7th of October. So we should remember that in the sort of the fact that we're so pleased that they're being released. But ultimately, neither Hamas nor Israel has indicated any wish whatsoever so far, certainly not publicly, to lift the siege or to lift the conflict. You know, and that, I think, one of Hamas's aims was to delay the ground offensive, was to use this as a bargaining chip for humanitarian aid, which they get political kudos from amongst the Palestinians. So both sides will be using this to actually strengthen their position at the moment. The only positive to come out of this, apart from obviously the humanitarian aspect of the safety of the hostages concerned, is that they will have established a methodology for communicating and negotiating. So if it comes to the point that either side wishes to start bringing the conflict to an end, or to de-escalate it, there is an established method of communication and negotiation, mediation, if you like, through the Qataris and so on, for doing so. And that is crucially important when it comes to the time to do it, because in many conflicts in the past, in other parts of the world, those conflicts could have been ended sooner than they were, had there been such an established mechanism in place. So that's a positive, but it's one to park for the future.
Now, Henry, I just finally wanted to ask you, and this is about weapons. As I understand it, so I read that Iran have a new missile that could get through the Israeli defences, so, you know, the Iron Dome that they have there. Is this a serious worry for Israel?
Only if Iran were to become more directly involved, because there's actually a few weapons in the Iranian arsenal that would present a challenge to the Iron Dome and other air defence assets that the Israelis have. But if those were to be deployed, then it would be involving Iran directly. And I think one of the successes from the point of view of the international community here has been the collective behind the scenes and sometimes overt in terms of the naval assets in the Eastern Mediterranean. The warning that has been given to Iran to stay out of this directly. And I don't see Iran really employing these weapons. They're out there. They're a risk, but it's not just the Israelis who are able to shoot these weapons down. The United States Navy has already intercepted a number of missiles that were destined or aimed at Israel. So there is that outer sort of security, if you like, for the Israeli state, but only if deployed by other nations or other hostile forces outside the immediate conflict between the Palestinians of Gaza and the Israelis. So, I don't see that. It is a risk, it is a threat that they will be thinking about, but I don't see this actually being sort of top of the list of the Israeli priorities or concerns at this stage.
Henry Bolton, thank you very much. Good to talk to you. That's Henry Bolton. He's a defence expert. Let's get closer to home now. In London, thousands of protesters have gathered this afternoon for a march against the surging levels of anti-Semitism across the country. Organisers of the march say that they no longer feel welcome in the capital, especially with the number of pro-Palestine protests. I mean, we've had one pretty much every weekend. So joining me now is GBNews political correspondent Catherine Forster. Catherine, thank you for joining me. What was the mood like at the protest today compared to what happened yesterday?
Yes, a sombre mood here today. The march started at 1:30 outside the Royal Courts of Justice. Many thousands of people here now progressing along, as you can see behind me. They're singing at the moment, but a lot of chanting. The words simply "bring them home," referring, of course, to the couple of hundred hostages taken by Hamas on the 7th of October. OK, we know that some of them, thankfully, have been released, but there's still many, many held, the families obviously in agony. And the feeling is that the Jewish community felt it needed to come out and stand and say enough is enough, because we know, don't we, that since October the 7th, anti-Semitism has spiked in this country, as it has around the world. There's been paint daubed on Jewish schools. There's been Jewish school children trying to hide the fact that they're Jewish on the way to school. Jewish people feeling unsafe in London and in the United Kingdom. They want to come out to say this is enough, this needs to stop. Now, unexpectedly, former Prime Minister Boris Johnson appeared. I spoke to him a little bit earlier. Let's see what he had to say.
Very sad in a way that this march has to take place at all. Well, I'm afraid it does, because what we're all doing here, and the only thing we're really doing, is showing solidarity with Jewish people. And that's necessary, because since October the 7th, I'm afraid there's been a very peculiar response in many parts of the world, including, I'm sad to say, in London. And what we've seen is, I'm afraid, the re-emergence of anti-Semitism and a failure to focus on the appalling terroristic acts of Hamas and what they did on October the 7th. And I just think we need to remember that. And, whatever the rights and wrongs of what Israel has done or is doing, I think that the anti-Semitism that we've seen in some of these marches around Western Europe and further afield has really confirmed for me the absolute necessity, the human necessity for Israel to exist. And that's basically why we're here.
And in terms of international diplomacy, how hopeful are you that this current wave of this very old conflict can be resolved?
I hope it can. And it remains the position of the UK government, as you know, my position certainly, that there must be a two-stage solution. But what we're trying to address here, what I'm trying to address here, is a separate thing in a way, which is the re-emergence, the recrudescence of anti-Semitism. And it's kind of like an old spore of a virus that lurks beneath the floorboards of Western civilization, our collective memory, and it comes out from time to time. It's perennial, it won't go away, and it flares up again. We're seeing a flare-up, and we need to to call it that.
So Boris Johnson there, former Prime Minister, of course, showing his support, showing his solidarity to UK Jews and indeed the Jewish community around the world, still hopeful ultimately of a two-state solution. The mood very peaceful here, as it generally is during the day, I would say, at the pro-Palestinian marches too. I've been to many of them. Unfortunately, we had a bit of abuse being from GBNews yesterday, which was very unpleasant. But often in the evening, you get an element of trouble and arrests are made. It'll be very interesting to see today. This is the first march against anti-Semitism, if it passes off completely peacefully throughout the day. Certainly a big police presence here, 1,000 police, potentially 40,000 people marching. The police keen to make sure that the Jewish community can feel that they're safe.
OK, Catherine, now I wanted to ask you about this because we heard an update on Lee Anderson's claim that he was offered money to join the Reform Party. Tell us more.
Yes, there's a real war of words that's broken out between Lee Anderson, the deputy chair of the Conservative Party, and Richard Tice, the leader of the Reform Party. We've had an exclusive statement from Lee Anderson in the last few minutes on GB News. I will give you the details shortly, but just to wrap up for anybody who's not been following this through the day, the Sunday Times reported this morning that Lee Anderson there'd been a leaked recording of Lee Anderson saying that he'd been offered £400,000 to defect from the Conservatives to the Reform Party. Richard Tice of the Reform Party was on broadcast this morning, said that absolutely not, that no money had been offered, that yes, of course, Reform talked to people of all parties, but at no point was any money offered. And he basically said Lee Anderson was just doing this to use this as leverage to get himself made deputy chairman of the Conservative Party. Now, Lee Anderson has issued a statement, and it's quite long. I'll just read you a few bits, but basically said the allegations made by Richard Tice are simply ridiculous. Yes, he goes on to say that you know, he talks to people of from lots of parties, that he was made an offer, goes on about his reasons for wanting to become deputy chairman, but it says that this was in no way connected to an offer of a job with Reform, and says Mr. Tice needs to look closer to home to see what his own senior members are saying and doing behind the scenes. He needs to keep better control of his party. Otherwise, incidents like this just make them look like amateurs, and amateurs whose only purpose seems to be giving Starmer the keys to number 10. Now, I should point out, both these men are politicians. They are both also GB News presenters, though fortunately, perhaps, they do not present shows on the same day. But lots of people are keen on the Reform Party. They go up to 10% in the polls. Lots of people think that they are part of the answer. But of course, the Conservative message and the Lee Anderson message is, if you vote for Reform, all you're going to do is put Labour and Keir Starmer into Downing Street.
Catherine, thank you so much for that. That's Catherine Forster. She's live there out on the marches in London. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Coming up, my head-to-headers will be joining me in the studio to debate who you trust most with immigration. But up next, join the rest of the footballing world to pay tribute to the former England manager Terry Venables, who died at aged 80.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. It's fast approaching 29 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. It's time to go head-to-head in a clash of minds. I'm asking, by banning marches, are we at risk of limiting freedom of speech? I hear it all the time. Now, listen, pro-Palestine demonstrators, they defied police's warnings, with some of them carrying banners with anti-Semitic hate on them. You know, Suella Braverman called them hate marches. Is it time, though, to ban future marches of this nature from taking place? But if we do, are we then risking limiting our freedom of speech? Let's see what my head-to-headers make of this. Joining me, GB News senior political commentator Nigel Nelson, and also political commentator and Conservative special advisor Claire Pearsall. Ladies first. What have you got round your neck? It's like some sort of animal. Oh, it's not, is it? Sorry.
It's warm and fluffy.
It's her coat, sorry.
It's rude of me. Well, you thought I had a cat.
I think I some sort of...
It's cold.
I didn't notice it earlier. Sorry. Sorry, Claire.
No, we shouldn't ban marches. I think if we go straight into that, because once you start doing that, which marches do you accept? Which marches are you going to ban? Is it all of them? Is it some of them? What happens to those causes that people feel very strongly about and they want to gather together? What happens to that? Then they pop up in towns and cities where there are no police present, there's no route, there are so many different problems. And I think you just get that pressure cooker of opinion and emotion, whether it be hate, love, whatever. And that's going to burst. So I think that we need to allow them. What we shouldn't allow, or as we've seen, are banners with anti-Semitic slogans, singing of things like From the River to the Sea,
terrible.
which is appalling. Awful. Things like that need to be stopped, and the police need to come down on that a lot heavier and a lot quicker than they do.
But they've been told they know that, though, and they're still doing it.
And they're still allowing it. And as we've seen from those marches, especially the one yesterday, they started out with those banners. There was footage of them right at the beginning. Why were they not taken to one side? The banners removed.
I would
the
fine
police
them.
should be able to
I
do
wouldn't
it.
even. I'd say you carry that. I'll fine you up to £1,000.
Yeah,
and
if you want to, and if you want to carry on, then you put it down to one side and we'll dispose of it for you. And I think that would be a much better way round of dealing with these marches.
But they, I mean, a lot of them have descended into what has been violence, and that's why, when we were speaking to Catherine, she said, at the moment, it's fine, but a lot of them descend, especially the pro-Palestinian ones, fireworks being thrown at police. What's your thoughts, Nigel?
Well, first of all, that happens at the after the march is finished. I mean, the actual marches themselves have predominantly been quite good.
But you're dividing that, though. You can't divide that. That's all one thing. It has to be considered as one thing.
Well, no, I mean, the whole thing is that the organised march, which is the only thing you could ever ban anyway, if you were thinking of banning, which would be wrong, I agree with Claire on that, ends at 5 o'clock. That the marches start, they finish. After that, they're out of the hands of the organisers. So I think that those are individual groups, troublemakers or whatever, who cause that trouble. When it comes to the slogans, of course, that we should ban anything that makes comparisons with Hitler or the Holocaust or Nazi Germany. That's anti-Semitic. From the river to the sea, I disagree with Claire on this one. From the river to the sea has a number of different interpretations.
Oh, that's handy, isn't it?
There are Israelis who think it means that the Palestinians want to chuck them into the sea and expunge the state of Israel.
Well, that's not good either, is it?
No, but also Palestinians, and I've talked to Palestinian politicians on the West Bank about this, what they're saying is that doesn't mean that at all. At the mildest level, it can simply mean some free movement, a corridor between Gaza and the West Bank in the event of an independent Palestinian state. So the West Bank has access to a seaport. It can mean that you're talking about from the river to the sea, we want to see a Palestinian state with slightly bigger borders, but it means a load of different things.
And then there's the meaning where it means to annihilate all Jewish people from the river to the sea. Look, Nigel, I think that that's semantics and people play with those to justify behaviour that's unacceptable. And if they are told, irrespective of what you think that means, that it is a hate thing, so don't do it, and then, and then people do it, then you are now participating in it. And I think the people chanting that knew that this is offensive to Jewish people, and in that respect, that's the end of it, because...
But that is a restriction on free speech.
But it's not... Well, is it a restriction of free speech? No, it isn't. It's saying if you do that, there are consequences.
But if you do it in an intimidating way, say you did it outside a synagogue or a Jewish school, absolutely right. I think the police should step in and deal with them, because that would be deliberately intimidating. To actually chant it along a London road...
is unacceptable.
Well, to me, that would be an infringement on free speech to arrest people for doing it.
But how can you think it is acceptable when the Jewish community has stated that they feel intimidated and threatened, they feel it is anti-Semitic? I witnessed a conversation between a young British Jewish lady and a young Palestinian gentleman. And both of them want the same thing. They want peace. However, the Jewish lady brought out the fact that she is offended, she is frightened by the amount of people chanting from the river to the sea. And she asked this gentleman, this is what we feel. Please, can you convey to your community that this isn't right? And he said, no, we don't believe that it means what you think. And it's like even being told that it's offensive, it is frightening people, it is putting a community at risk, and they still continue to do it. Can you say that that is ever going to be right? Surely you need to be able to enforce the law with something which does incite hatred, and it does. It's quite clear
that it does. But that's the difficulty, where the law comes in there, because what you've got there is exactly the point I was making. There are two interpretations of what that phrase means, and according
but Nigel, there's two interpretations of what a coconut is, and that doesn't mean...
Yes. But we're not banning those, are we?
No, but there are two interpretations. One is a very great insult and a racist slur, and the other is the fruit. I don't even think it's a fruit, but it's the nut that falls off the tree. So the bottom line is, which one are you going to interpret? You have to look at the situation and the circumstance.
I think that's right.
And if it's a march where you've been told not to do it, then there is no excuse.
But that's where it's an infringement on free speech. If it's just on the march...
Very good afternoon to you. It is 3:30 for Aaron Armstrong here in the GB News studio. Let's get you up to date with the headlines. Reports in the Middle East are suggesting the Israeli government has received the list of hostages who are expected to be released today. And officials told the Times of India the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office are notifying the families. Now, it's the third day of a 4-day truce Qatar, which has been mediating on proceedings, says it hopes the truce will be extended with the release of further captives. 9-year-old Irish-Israeli girl Emily Hand has been reunited with her father following her release by Hamas late last night. She is among 17 hostages who were freed by the terrorist group after 50 days in captivity. 13 Israelis, that's 6 women and 7 children, along with 4 Thai nationals, were transported out of Gaza through the Rafah boarding crossing last night. Boris Johnson's told GB News anti-Semitism is like a virus which, in his words, lurks beneath the floorboards of Western civilization. The former Prime Minister is attending a march in central London standing against anti-Jewish racism. It comes amid concerns over rising tensions across the UK, sparked by the conflict in Gaza. Former England manager Terry Venables has died at the age of 80 after a long illness. His family released a statement saying, "We're totally devastated by the loss of a wonderful husband." Terry Venables took charge of England between 1994 and 1996, leading them to the semi-finals of Euro 96. Gary Lineker paid tribute, describing Venables as vibrant, charming and witty. That's all we have time for the moment, but there's more at the top of the hour and also more right now on our website, gbnews.com.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these 3.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Akua, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursdays from...
Welcome back. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, footballers across the country have come together to pay tribute to the former English footballer and manager Terry Venables, who passed away aged 80. Mr Venables played and captained for various clubs, including Chelsea, Tottenham Hotspur and Queen's Park Rangers during the 1960s and 70s. So joining me now is GB News sports presenter Aidan McGee. Aidan, thank you for joining me now. Terry Venables, he's died, he's aged 80. What will he most be remembered for?
That's quite a pertinent question itself, Nana, because one of the criticisms of Terry Venables during his career, and Alex Ferguson said this himself, as did George Graham, one of his great friends and contemporaries, that Terry was so good at so many different things, and in fact, football coaching was just never going to be enough for him. He had a stellar career as a player. You mentioned some of the clubs he played for there. He was never really an elite footballer in the sense that some of his contemporaries like Alan Mullery and George Best were. But he did get 2 caps for England. He played probably over 500 games for the clubs that you mentioned. But it was the coaching and it was the imparting of knowledge which made him really come into his own. You look at the team of the 80s, as it was described at Crystal Palace in the late 70s, early 80s. It didn't really work out at boardroom level, and it became a bit of a noose around his neck in some ways, this whole team of the 80s moniker that still exists today. But when he went to Queen's Park Rangers, that's where he really kind of made his name as a football manager. And just for context there, he took QPR to the 1982 FA Cup final as a second division side. Only 2 clubs have done that since. Sunderland in 92, Cardiff in 2008. He took them up as champions in 1983, and then in 84 he got them into Europe in their first season in the top flight, and that was when, and this will never happen again, Anna, the Queen's Park Rangers manager was poached by FC Barcelona. They had won 1 La Liga title in Spain since 1960. He delivered that title in his first season. He then took them to the European Cup final in 1986, losing on penalties. Then he came back to England, and then he got a chance with Tottenham Hotspur. And this is where the problems with his outside interest came into it. I mean, he had a failed business with running a tailor alongside George Graham and Ron Chopper Harris a few years before that. He had a nightclub in the West End called Scribes West. He wrote a sitcom. He'd already written some novels by then. He was a very accomplished singer. I mean, I went to Burnham Beaches a few years ago where England were occupied during Euro 96. And a young German guy who had interest in football was showing me around all the parts of the hotel where Paul Gascoigne was up at 3 o'clock in the morning playing tennis, for example. And he pointed out the grand piano. And he said, oh, that's where Terry Venables used to serenade the squad to relax them before games. But just before that England experience, the Tottenham thing was interesting because he got the best out of Paul Gascoigne. There's no question about that. Gary Lineker was one of his top players as well. But I do think it was England Euro 96, getting England to the semi-final, those fantastic performances against Scotland and Holland that will really stand out when we look back on his career. But there's so much to admire. This was a multi-talented individual, huge charisma. My own disappointment was that he managed my club, Queen's Park Rangers, with extreme distinction. He was often invited back. I tried to interview him in 2017 at the Grosvenor Hotel, and it was fellow legend Pat Jennings who said to me, look, Terry looks well, but I would advise you not to interview him because he's not in the best of health cognitively right now. And that was very sad. It was a real regret of mine.
Oh, very sad. Aidan McGee, thank you very much. Good to talk to you. That was Terry Venables, who's died aged 80. If you just joined us, welcome aboard. It's just coming up to 44 minutes after 3 o'clock. It's time now to go head-to-head in a clash of minds. Rishi Sunak has vowed to clamp down on immigration and conceded that in the face of growing Tory anger about his past performance, that there is obviously a lot more to do to reduce the record numbers of people who are immigrating to the UK. And earlier this week, official figures showed net migration is running at a record high, prompting Boris Johnson, Suella Braverman and other right-wing Conservatives to attack Sunak for failing to honour the government's 2019 Tory manifesto pledge to bring down overall immigration. So let's see what my head-to-headers make of that. Joining me now, GB News senior political commentator Nigel Nelson, and also political commentator and former Conservative Special Advisor Claire Pessell. Who do you trust, Nigel Nelson?
Well, I think Labour have got the best policies at the moment because they're actually...
They haven't got any.
Well, they have. They've got enough to actually do something about it.
Which are what?
Well, for instance, if we're just talking about legal migration, that employers can pay 20% less for foreign workers. They do because it's cheaper, and as a result of that, British people can't get jobs there because obviously that they can't compete on the wages. What Labour would also do would be for settlement schemes.
So let me get this straight. They're going to pay foreign workers 20% less than they do now.
If they're in shortage occupation. So, for instance...
Well, isn't that going to work? It'll be a bit like the EU situation where you've got cheaper workforce coming in, and therefore bringing down the wages of those around who actually live here for those jobs. So how is that a good policy?
Well, it depends whether you want to end immigration, whether you want to lower the immigration figures or not. So most of this is being driven by vacancies in health and social care.
But the wages there are low enough as it is.
They're low, exactly. And
so why is Labour's policy a good idea?
Well, it's also Robert Jenrick's policy, the immigration minister. He's nicked it from Labour and says he wants to do the same thing, and he wants to go further and make it that people can't come in unless they earn at least £35,000. Now, if you raise your care workers' wages to that kind of level, we're going to need higher taxes to pay for the care workers we need. This is why all these...
But a lot of those are private businesses. So why do we pay higher taxes? Private businesses who will have to make more money. It doesn't come out of our taxes.
Well, it does in the sense that health and social care are linked. So on the basis that we have to pay for the NHS out of taxes, you're right that some of these things are private businesses, but we still have an awful lot that aren't. So you've got council care homes and so on where you would have to pay care workers there. Point I'm making is that everything is actually interlinked. So if you just say, let's get immigration down, this is what you can do to do it, but it has a knock-on effect elsewhere.
All right, Claire Pessell.
Oh, see, now this is a really difficult one. I don't trust Labour to bring down immigration at all, and in fact I think all they will do is raise it. They don't have proper policies in place and proper plans, and their leader is over there being nice to the EU, wanting ever closer ties, and probably will rejoin enough to get more
David
people
Cameron.
across.
David Cameron has also been talking about closer ties with the EU. I know this is on security.
I was going to say, I mean, that's on security. Keir Starmer was deliberately talking about the migration issue when he was over there, and it would look as if we would end up taking a quota of the European migrants into the UK, so it would increase numbers. I don't think it's really difficult because it's such a big subject, and you've got legal migration and you've got illegal migration. The government is in a mess with it because it cannot get any of its plans off the ground for varying different reasons, mainly because they're ill thought through and very expensive. But it's interesting that Labour haven't come up with anything that looks remarkably like a plan. They're putting some wishy-washy pledges together that they would get rid of the backlog in asylum claims. OK, well, how are you going to do that? Because it's going to cost money and time, and they don't have the answers. The government is struggling because it has had 13 years to sort these things out. And I think it's a little bit rich of the likes of Suella Braverman to say this is appalling, look at the net migration figures, when she has been Home Secretary for the last 12 months and hasn't managed to actually deal with it herself. The question comes down to whether
we have a flexible immigration system for the needs of the British economy. So in other words,
that was the plan, wasn't it?
Well, yes, indeed. But at the moment, I mean, Jenrick is coming up with an idea where you put a cap on, for instance, again, health and social care workers coming in, not allowing their families in. If you work a flexible system based on what we need, so at the moment we need care workers, also on the shortage occupation list of ballet dancers, we probably don't need ballet dancers to undercut domestic ones.
But that's where the government actually, there's been a really, really sensible suggestion from Robert Jenrick to remove the shortage occupation list as in its entirety,
yes.
because I mean it is outdated. We don't. How many ballerinas do we need? How many geologists do we need? I think it's ridiculous.
But if you made that flexible,
but I do think that you start to make problems for yourself if you put caps on numbers. And I've been there and I've seen this, where we've reached the cap for healthcare workers coming into the United Kingdom, and the NHS was struggling, and they needed those workers urgently, and you have to fiddle around with the rules. So yes, you need a flexible system, but unfortunately the immigration system doesn't allow this.
So you disagree with Robert Jenrick on your side?
Yeah, I do.
On the basis that a cap would be wrong?
Yes, because I've worked it.
What about stopping relatives coming in with people, which obviously is an attraction if they're going to do a certain job?
Absolutely is, and sometimes people abuse that. And there are cases where you have a university student who has not only bought their dependent children and their spouse, but they've also bought their mother, their grandfather, their auntie, and that's abusing of a system. So I do think that we need to be a lot tighter.
But they're paying for all that. These people aren't drained on the
But it doesn't matter, because I think that is an abuse of a system. If you are coming here as a person, you have a spouse, you have children, absolutely, I don't see a problem with the family group. What I do have an issue with, if you start adding on your grandparents, your parents, your aunties, uncles, the person that lives down the road that may have looked after you when you were 5, then that's an abuse of a system, and that has to be stopped.
OK, so I mean, the Tories have let it run riot. We have had some big incidents like the war in Ukraine, and of course we've had this situation with Hong Kong. So loads of things have happened which have meant that we've taken on larger and larger proportions of people. But in the end, who do you trust? Nigel, who do you trust?
I think that Labour have proper policies for this, the Tories don't.
But I just don't see how, by reducing the amount that they're required, that'll increase it, won't it, Claire?
Yeah, I mean, I have to trust the Conservatives to get it right if they have the right Home Secretary in place.
They've had how many?
5.
Is it 8?
I don't know, 5, 6. Is it 8?
I think it's 8.
I've missed a few.
I don't know whether I trust any of them.
They come and go very quickly.
They do, don't they? Wilson, who do you trust at home? GBviews@gbnews.com. I'd love to hear what you think. Probably none of them. As Britain braces for a possible freeze next week, with temperatures plunging to as low as -5 degrees, many are saying that the government's energy bill support scheme should be revived. And as the cost of living crisis continues to bite, demand for another winter fuel allowance is high. But should the government be subsidising our energy bills again? Remember what it means. It means that they'll borrow off us, or we'll pay less, but the money is a loan. It doesn't mean that we're going to have to pay it back. Remember that, Claire Pearsall?
I think there has to be a point where the government cannot subsidise the public any further. And if you're going to... We have a plan in place for those vulnerable people, for the elderly. They have... there are packages in place for their fuel bills. If they're going to look at subsidising everybody in the country, then that's blatantly ridiculous. There are a lot of people that don't require money off of the state in order to heat their homes, and if you're not going to means test it, you're going to give it to everybody, then you're going to have some people who are going to have their heating on like a sauna, and other people that are going to be suffering. And I don't think it's right. The energy companies need to play their part. They need to go and look at what they can do. But I'm not convinced it's for the government to keep burying the hand in the pocket and handing it out to people for no good.
Nigel Nelson.
Well, I mean, I tend to agree with that, actually. That there was a subsidy that ran from October to April this year, and that capped energy costs at £2,500. Now the bills have been going down, but of course they're about to go up again. So in January, you're looking at paying on the cap £94 extra. I think the worry for Jeremy Hunt is that inflation will start going up, and he'll have a problem with that. But if you start paying people's bills constantly, or the government does, all that's going to happen is the taxpayer is effectively paying it, and taxes will end up going up.
Well, this is what we've had, and this is why we've found ourselves in the situation with huge taxes now to sort of counteract and pay for this. So ultimately, then, then, should we stop these subsidies, yes or no?
Well, I mean, the subsidies...
Yes or no? Yes or no?
No, not for the pensioners
yes
and
no?
for benefit claimants.
No, time to stop them. Well, listen, we'd love to hear your thoughts. GBViews@gbnews.com. Stay tuned, loads more still to come. You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on the way. 50 days since Hamas struck. Who is winning the war? Send me your thoughts. Also, my monologue is on how the world has gone mad. You won't want to miss that. First, weather.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. It's still rather cloudy, staying unsettled over the next few days and temperatures starting to fall further as well. Low pressure dominating the weather pattern at the moment, bringing some brisk winds to eastern areas. This low pressure moves away, allowing brief respite before then further weather systems move in through the middle to end of next week. This evening time, a lot of cloud across the UK, outbreaks of rain, 1 or 2 heavier bursts possible. Temperatures dropping under clear skies across parts of Scotland, a patchy frost here, but showers feeding in from the northeast. Elsewhere, lots of cloud, outbreaks of rain, it will keep temperatures up, so a milder night than of late, generally holding up between 5 and 9 Celsius. But that means England, Wales, Northern Ireland will start off cloudy, outbreaks of rain, this slipping slowly south-eastwards as we go through the day, allowing brighter skies to follow across parts of Northern Ireland, western Scotland, later western fringes of England and Wales. The east staying breezy with showery outbreaks of rain, which could be heavy at times, turning wintry over the higher ground of Scotland. And temperatures dropping as the day goes on, generally into single figures as the winds turn around to a northerly direction. Then into Tuesday, it's a cold, frosty start, some fog patches first thing, and then a brighter, drier day for many. There will be some wintry showers across the north, and then the next few days, temperatures continue to fall, overnight frost and fog, and the risk of some hill snow too.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
to find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next 2 hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly, and also broadcaster and author Christine Hamilton. But before we get started, let's get your latest news headlines with Aaron.
Good afternoon, it's 4 o'clock. I'm Aaron Armstrong. Some breaking news. Israel's defence forces say the Red Cross has now received 14 Israeli hostages and 3 foreign nationals who are being held captive by Hamas. In exchange, Israel has agreed to free a number of Palestinian prisoners. That is to be confirmed. The exchange comes on the third day of a 4-day truce. Now, Qatar, which has been mediating between the sides, says it hopes the truce will be extended with the release of further captives. Now, an Irish-Israeli girl who was initially feared to have been killed has been reunited with her father following her release by Hamas late last night. Emily Hand was amongst 17 hostages freed by the terrorist group yesterday after 50 days in captivity. 13 Israelis, that's 6 women and 7 children, along with 4 Thai nationals, were transported out of Gaza through the Rafah border crossing. And Amit Solva, chairman of the kibbutz Emily was taken from, says he's particularly relieved.
Hand is a closure for me because unfortunately I'm the one who told her father that she has been found murdered. And a week later I'm the one who told the father that she probably captured. So it's a kind of a relief for me that she's still alive, she's here, she's with us, and I have to tell his father to give him a hug.
Well, the boss of the Safra Children's Hospital at the Sheba Medical Centre, that's Professor Itai Pasak, has been discussing the treatment of the women and children who were freed yesterday.
I'm happy to say that despite the fact that the harsh conditions they have been under and the experience of captivity, they did not require any emergent medical intervention. We will keep them here at the Edmond Hillary Safra Children's Hospital for as long as they need and care for them, help them in their preparation of coming back to their communities.
Well, 39 Palestinians were released from a prison in the West Bank last night in exchange for the Israeli hostages. Hundreds of people welcomed their return in the early hours of this morning. Crowds cheered, they were clapping and waving flags in the streets as the prisoners arrived on buses. It's understood the group includes 6 women and 33 children. Boris Johnson's told GB News anti-Semitism is like a virus which lurks beneath the floorboards of Western civilization. The former Prime Minister has been attending a march in central London, standing against anti-Jewish racism. It comes amid concerns over rising tensions in the UK sparked by the conflict in Gaza. And Mr Johnson's told us it's sad that the march has to go ahead in the first place.
All doing here, and the only thing we're really doing is showing solidarity with Jewish people. And that's necessary because since October the 7th, I'm afraid there's been a very peculiar response in many parts of the world, including, I'm sad to say, in London. And what we've seen is, I'm afraid, the re-emergence of anti-Semitism. and a failure to focus on the appalling terroristic acts of Hamas.
And former England manager Terry Venables has died at the age of 80. Venables managed England from 1994 to 96, leading them to the semi-finals of Euro 96. He won the FA Cup with Tottenham and led Barcelona to the Spanish League title. His family released a statement saying, "We're totally devastated by the loss of a wonderful husband and father who passed away peacefully yesterday after a long illness." And Gary Lineker, who played under Venables, said he was much more, though, than just a great manager. He was vibrant, he was charming, he was witty, he was a friend. We're live across the UK on TV, in your car, digital radio, and on your smart speaker. Just say play GB News. Now, let's get back to Nana.
Thank you, Aaron. Right, it's just coming up to 5 minutes after 4 o'clock. Welcome on board if you just joined me. I'm Nana Akua. I like to call this one, Has the World Gone Mad? Now, if you ask people who have bought into what is, in my view, claptrap, that gender identity is not related to biological sex, this can't even make sense to them, surely. Today I read that newborn babies were having their gender identity rather than their biological sex registered at birth. Yep. So instead of the words biological sex, which makes perfect sense because it's binary, you either are registered male or female, which is determined by your anatomy, midwives filling in the forms at King's College London and Guy's and St Thomas Hospital were given the option to select gender identity instead on the new IT system. So if gender identity, as these ideologues continue to profess, is something that you as an individual determine and can be different to your biological sex, how the hell can a newborn baby who frankly doesn't even know what is happening, or a medic who's only just delivered the baby, and the parents who won't know what the child supposedly identifies as, A, because she can't speak, and B, because the child doesn't even know about the world yet, how can someone determine the gender identity of that newborn if the whole premise of gender identity is that it is unrelated to biological sex? It doesn't stand up to scrutiny. And something else here, in my view, is happening. This slow creep to modify our language subtly, because that's how those behind this nonsense have behaved thus far. Things like including those who identify as women to the definition of woman in the dictionary, justified by the way the word is used rather than the actual word, what the word means, making the changes with no real consensus. But the effect enables men to claim that they are women according to the dictionary definition. But changing the definition of biological sex at birth to include the option to select gender identity is scarily chilling. It's an infiltration of the influence of transgender activism. Now, this should have no place in a setting where biology and fact truly matters, as these forms are part of a patient's health records for life. Now, a midwife blew the whistle on this practice. The changes were all part of a new £450 million system called EPIC, which was being rolled out to London teaching hospitals and NHS trusts nationwide over the next 15 years. Maya Forstarter from the campaign group Sex Matters said, London hospitals registering babies by gender identity is absurd and chilling, and a clear indicator of the extent to which trans activism has taken over the NHS. Now, a spokesperson for the hospitals thanked the Daily Mail, the Mail on Sunday, who uncovered the story for what they called the unfortunate language. And they said, this error is being rectified as quickly as possible, and we apologise for any confusion caused. We are changing it to read sex for the newborn hospital discharge summary. Can you imagine if this had gone unchecked? All this under the backdrop of the removal of the word mother, woman, breastfeeding, I mean, the list goes on. Look, I get it. Some people believe that gender identity is separate to biological sex. I don't. But they are welcome to that belief. But I draw the line at a baby being given a gender identity at birth. So before we get stuck into the debate, here's what else is coming up today. For the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, it's 50 days since Hamas struck, but who is winning the war? Israel-Hamas or no one? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, and I have a poll up right now on X asking that very question. Send me your thoughts, gbviews@gbnews.com, or tweet me at GBNews. It's been 50 days since Hamas struck with that awful attack on the 7th. But who do you think is winning the war? Then at 4:50, it's World View. I'll be speaking to an Israeli government spokesperson, Dr. Ophir Falk, on the ongoing hostage negotiations with Hamas. Plus, we'll cross live to Los Angeles with Paul Dudridge, the host of the Politics People podcast, to get the latest on Trump leading in the polls and get an update on the Republicans who are urging Ron DeSantis to drop out of the race. At 5, it's Outside, and I'll be speaking to a prominent founding member of an all-female dance troupe most commonly associated with the BBC TV music chart show Top of the Pops. Have you guessed it yet? That's on the way in the next hour. As ever, tell me what you think on everything we're discussing. Email gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at gbnews. Right, let's get started. Let's welcome again to my panel broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly, and also broadcaster and author Christine Hamilton. Right, so welcome. Good to see you both.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yes, lovely. Christine, I'm going to start with you. Eventually, somebody spotted this. This is why it was changed. But had this midwife not seen it, and people like the Mail on Sunday not got hold of it and spoken about it, this would have gone under the radar.
It could have gone under the radar for goodness knows how long, and a whole raft of babies. I don't know how many babies are born every day. Could have had that assigned on their birth certificate, and once it's there, it's there. I mean, it's absolutely mind-blowing. You wonder how this can happen in a sensible world, but the world's gone mad. It really has. What worries me is that my feeling is that most normal, ordinary, day-to-day people like us think that that's mad. They dare not speak out, because look what happens when somebody with the clout of J.K. Rowling speaks out. She gets cancelled, she gets absolutely demonised and death threats. So normal people think, I'm going to keep my head down. But I think the majority is on our side. This is absolute nonsense, and it's got to stop. What sort of money has that cost to change it to gender and change it back again when we've got record waiting lists? I mean, I'm horrified by that.
But the point is, these people who believe in the notion of gender identity, I don't. It's male or female, it's biological, it's quite simple. But if people want to go that complicated way...
Later on...
Well, but they're saying that you can decide on your gender, and that's how the belief is. So if you can decide on your gender, and that's what gender identity is, how can a baby do that?
Well, it can't, can it?
Thank God the hospital have corrected it.
Yeah, it was a midwife who spotted it, yeah.
Well, thank God for the midwife, and thank God for the hospital, and thank God for the Mail on Sunday, because it is insidious.
And thank God for Nana.
And thank God for Nana Akua, who also writes for the sister paper, the Daily Mail. It's disconcerting, it's troublesome, and it's worrying, isn't it, that word replacement and the normalisation. And what always gets me, if you have any question about climate science, about the veracity of it, people will say, well, don't you trust the scientists? You trust your doctor when he prescribes you something. Now, that's part of science, but you don't trust the climate scientists.
Well, you'll be called a climate denier to start names, isn't it?
So you can't have it both ways. Either you trust science, so if you trust science, then you can't decide your own gender.
No.
It's one or the other. It's binary, just like gender.
But they try and detach the word gender from sex. Yeah. So then their argument is that gender is not associated to biology. But if that's the case, it means that you can determine it, but a baby cannot determine it. Of course it can't. So the fact that they're using that language suggests that they're trying to a slow creep of that language.
It's mission creep.
It's mission creep.
It's word replacement.
And it's normalising nonsense. That's what it's doing.
Yeah, but also, you see, we know that a baby can't decide when they've just been born.
Well, it's not true, though. See, the fact that we're discussing it, saying a baby can't decide, but that's why I specifically said that if you buy into it, then a baby can't decide.
Yeah.
But it's not real.
No, but what's worrying is that it's infiltrated the NHS to such an extent. Now, unless it's the person who's actually signed it all off, who's replaced the word sex with gender identity, then we need to determine how many people are involved in the, if you like, the chain of command. that thought that was a good idea. And what else has been replaced? And what other normalisation?
Are they cooking up too in the back room?
Well, there's mother, there's breastfeeding became chest feeding. They tried to get rid of the word mother. They tried to get rid of
people with wombs and stuff.
People with wombs, people who menstruate, so to getting rid of the fact that it's women. So removing language slowly. I mean, the dictionary definition of woman now includes men who identify as women. It didn't include that before.
That's the dictionary definition.
So they've added that in now as well. So if you're a man, you can now say, if you identify as a woman, that you are a woman. A man who identifies as a woman, in my view, is a trans woman. Of
course.
It's
so
not
now
a
they
woman,
can say a dictionary definition includes...
Yeah, and when I pointed this out, everyone goes, oh, no, it's nothing. And I thought, no, this is mission creep.
Excuse me, it is mission creep. As I say, it's normalising nonsense and it's a gross insult to women. We're not cis women, for goodness sake. We're women. Anybody who is different to a woman who wants to be a woman has to... They're the ones who have to put the adjective or the whatever. Trans women, you're right.
Yeah.
I refuse to call myself a cis, honestly.
I'm not a cis woman anyway. Don't call me cis.
It is so ridiculous that you begin to think it can't be true, but it's in the newspaper, so it must be.
But that's the thing. I mean, a lot of people might listen to us and think, oh, you're just being silly, it's the culture wars and everything. But the implications for it are vast, because you have suddenly accepted the notion that gender identity exists and is separate from biological sex, and now you are using that language interchangeably, which then starts to make it mean the same thing.
But it's the consequences of pushing back. You lose your job, you get cancelled. Only people, I've always said this, the pushback starts when there are commercial interests. For example, Netflix. There was a lot of pressure on the Netflix boss to drop a certain... I'll tell you what it was. It was a comedy show with the comedian...
Dave Chappelle.
Yeah, that's right. And there's a lot of pushback, trans activists. And the pushback stopped because all of a sudden Netflix realised that there was a lot of money at stake. And so you can be as nice as you want to trans activists, but as soon as shareholders start to lose dough, then reality kicks in.
Well, it was Dylan Mulvaney as well.
They broadcast it.
Dylan Mulvaney as well.
Presumably...
Of course, Budweiser, that's right.
And Anheuser-Busch, the owning company that owns it.
Presumably, you now have to ask a baby before they've had their first feed which one of... Is it 72 different pronouns they can choose?
Oh, it's ridiculous. Don't even get me started on that.
No, sorry.
Well, if you just joined us, welcome on board. It's just coming up to 16 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Coming up, it's time for World View. That's on the way. I'll be speaking to Israeli government spokesperson of the ongoing hostage negotiations with Hamas. But up next, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, 50 days since Hamas struck, who is winning the war? I've got a poll up right now on X asking you that very question. Send me your thoughts. Email gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at GBNews. Cast your vote now.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only three people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Akua, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Britain's news channel.
So it's just coming up to 4:20. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Keep your thoughts coming. GBviews at gbnews.com or tweet me at GB News. I was asking you a few questions. We've had a few messages in, actually. I was talking about, I did my monologue on the wokeness, and somebody, who's this? This is from Carol in Daventry. She says, love your programme. Can you be PM, please? Well, I don't think they pay enough. But it says, listening to Christine saying it's a mad world. If you watched Doctor Who last night, every woke box was ticked, including David Tennant asking an alien if it's preferred pronoun. Unbelievable. Ridiculous. Hilarious, though. I might have to watch it just for a laugh. But if you just join me, welcome. I'm Nana Akua. We are live. It's time now for the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, 50 days since Hamas struck, who is winning the war? As Israel and Hamas exchange hostages and prisoners, many fear that the focus on the freed hostages and therefore the ceasefire will mean Hamas will somehow survive the war even after the atrocities committed on October the 7th. Now, the Israeli government is under pressure from the families of the remaining hostages, as well as diplomatic efforts from the United States to restrain its assault on Gaza and focus instead on de-escalating measures in order to get its people out. But is restraint really the best policy when dealing with a militant terrorist group? And surely this is exactly what Hamas want. Can Israel still hope to defeat Hamas? So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, 50 days since Hamas struck, who is winning the war? Well, joining me now to discuss is Nigel Nelson, GB News senior political commentator, and Claire Pearsall, former Conservative special advisor. Right, Nigel, I'm going to start with you. Who do you think? What's your view on, what's your take on it anyway?
Israel's going to win. I don't think there's any doubt about that. They've mobilised 550,000 troops. That is in contrast to Hamas, about 25,000 strong. Of those, probably 5,000 have been killed already. So what's going to happen is that Israel will finally take over the north. The south will be much more difficult to do. There will be regime change in Gaza, and that means it's going to be a long war, but eventually they'll win it.
Oh, great Oracle Nigel. What do you think, Claire?
Neither side is winning at the moment. You've got innocent people on both sides dying. So therefore, I don't see how you can say that somebody is winning when that happens. I think the people. It is war, and I sincerely hope that Israel do succeed. I think Hamas needs to be taken out of the equation entirely. But at the moment, you look at both sides and you just think, no, none of this is right. None of this is working. It is an atrocious situation. The only people, strangely, that are coming out well at the moment are the Americans, for their negotiating power in setting up this deal with the Qataris. And I never thought I would ever say that Qataris were going to be top of the list here at the moment. But there are that kind of negotiation and that kind of high level from the Americans, let's give them the praise where we can, is helping to turn this situation around. There are an awful lot of Israelis who are really angry at what Netanyahu is doing, and obviously the rest of the world, like very, very sensible people, despise the terrorist group Hamas. So nobody's looking great at the moment. So I think that we need to get this settled. We need some kind of peace agreement to come in place.
But there's been a lot of support for people, the Palestinian people as well. But as we've seen, it's, in my view, quite difficult in many respects to divide a lot of the Palestinian people from the Hamas element, because there's a large portion of people, I would presume, in Palestine that would support Hamas.
Yeah,
that's my view. So I'm thinking that on that respect, and there are a lot of people around the world who are also, you've seen all the pro-Palestinian marches as well, a lot of people are in support of Palestine for this particular war.
Yes, I mean, they certainly are. I'm not sure about the support for Hamas. I mean, at the moment, the biggest danger we face is other countries getting involved, particularly Iran. Now, the whole point of the Americans sending a fleet there, and we've sent ships there as well, is to warn Iran, stay out, because that would escalate the conflict. But what it comes down at the moment, you have to divide Gaza from the West Bank. West Bank is Palestinian Authority, much more moderate, not entirely without some Hamas presence there, but moderate. And if they end up taking over Gaza at the end of all this, then you won't be able to, I think Claire's right, ever get rid of Hamas completely, but you should get them out of Gaza.
Claire?
I think, the most important thing we have to do, and Nigel's quite right on this, is to ensure that Iran don't get involved, because I think that really does make this conflict into something that is worse than we've already seen. And none of us want to have that. It drags in the Europeans, it drags in the UK. We have to respond. So I think that level of negotiation needs to happen, but we need to ensure that all of those hostages that were abducted by Hamas are returned to Israel via Egypt, or whatever way they're going to do it. That has to be on the cards, and that has to be the first priority. I mean, Israel care deeply at getting their own citizens back, that they will give back prisoners, some of which are convicted criminals, as we heard earlier from one of your guests, back to Palestine. So they are playing their part. What we cannot trust is Hamas to stick to their word. And as we've seen, they promise all sorts of things and then they backtrack on it, they U-turn, they delay things. They play a different game. And it's going to be very, very difficult to look at any future deals with Hamas at the table, because you cannot trust that they are going to work in the interests of Palestinian people.
What about the ceasefire, though, or this 4-day pause? Wouldn't this be an opportunity for Hamas to rearm
And that's always the worry, and it's why I've never called for a ceasefire, because it benefits Hamas more than it benefits anybody else. They can regroup, they can get firepower back, they can look at what they're doing and get their people involved a bit further. I think we need to be able to get aid into both regions. We need to be able to make sure people are cared for medically. So a pause, a humanitarian pause, is absolutely the right way forward. And I think Israel are looking as to whether that should be extended. It would be great if it could, but the last thing you want to risk is Hamas tooling up any further and causing more damage.
So I'm going to ask how you see this ending then, because as asked Nigel, he's given us his prophecy.
I don't think Nigel's wrong. I think that we will see Hamas reduced to a smaller fighting force. We'll never see them gone, completely. And what I would like to see is a two-state solution come up and some kind of stability in that region for the people that live there.
It's interesting. A lot of people talk about the two-state solution, Nigel, but it doesn't sound like Hamas want a two-state solution from there. If you even see their covenant, it doesn't state that. It says it basically wants to wipe out all the Jews. They've even said, one of the leaders from Hamas, if this is to be believed, on social media we've seen them say, and on TV actually, not in this country, but saying that they would like to do the 7th of October again. They would do it again.
Yes, I think all that is absolutely right.
But the two-state solution isn't an option.
Well, it's not an option for Hamas, which is why Hamas and the Palestinian Authority over in the West Bank are at odds with each other. because the Palestinian Authority know the two-state solution is the best result for Palestinians as a whole. You would then get rid of the refugee camps, which you still have, that have existed since 1948. The rest of the world agrees with that. The two-state solution is policy everywhere. America, Britain, that's the way forward. The trouble about this is that has now been put back as any kind of solution, probably in our lifetime. I just can't see how you're going to get to a two-state solution after what Hamas have done.
But it may involve Israel having to rescind some of the land that they have as well to give the Palestinians more space as well, which I can't see that happening.
Well,
why would you wouldn't be prepared
again,
to do that,
we've got the illegal settlements, and so what you need to do is many of those settlements on Palestinian land would have to be dismantled. Not an easy job, and I've looked at the settlements, and basically they're like huge housing estates. They're not sort of ramshackle shacks or anything like that. These are real permanent settlements. But if you have a two-state solution, they must come off Palestinian land, and then you must also decide what you do with Jerusalem. Now, the original idea was that Jerusalem will be maintained by internationally, say the United Nations or whatever. Neither side are very keen on that. So again, there's a long way to go to even get to a negotiation on two-state solution. Hamas have made that more difficult.
It's interesting because I saw a really incredible movie, and the guy who created that actually came here onto GBNews and talked about his film. And he actually went into the settlements and spoke to the people in the settlements who are or Jewish people who settled within the West Bank and within Gaza, but he mainly went to the West Bank. And it was incredible. They all got on really well with the Palestinian people as well. So it seems that there's a wider... Well, in the video, in the film that I saw, they all got on very well. And it was a community of people. So it does... I do feel a lot of this comes from
I'm sure some settlements weren't
No, but
that
he
way.
went across...
The ones I saw weren't getting on quite so well with each other.
Well, listen, the question is, what do you think then? 50 days since the Hamas struck, who do you think, in your view, is winning the war? Of course, that's Nigel Nelson and Claire Pearsall joining me to discuss. But what are your thoughts? GBNews at gbnews.com. You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News Live on TV, online and on digital radio. Coming up, we'll continue with the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, 50 days since Hamas struck, who is winning the war? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, Danny Kelly and also Christine Hamilton. Still to come, this week's Outside. Now, my guest later on today is a founding member of a famous 90s British all-female dance troupe called... Oh, it's to Pan's People. Do you remember that? Any ideas? But first, let's get your latest news headlines with Aaron. And it's 4:30. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. Israel's army says 14 Israeli hostages and 3 foreign nationals have been handed over to the Red Cross by Hamas. Israel has agreed to free a number of Palestinian prisoners in exchange. It comes on the third day of a 4-day truce. Qatar, which has been mediating between the sides, says it hopes the pause in fighting will be extended with the release of more captives. An Irish-Israeli girl who was initially feared dead has been reunited with her father following her release by Hamas late last night. Emily Hand was amongst 17 hostages freed by the terror group yesterday after 50 days in captivity. In total, it was 13 Israelis, 6 women and 7 children, along with 4 Thai nationals, and they were transported out of Gaza through the Rafah border crossing. Boris Johnson's told GB News anti-Semitism is like a virus which lurks beneath the floorboards of Western civilization. The former Prime Minister attended a march in central London standing against anti-Jewish racism. It comes amid concern over rising tensions across the UK sparked by the conflict in Gaza. And former England manager Terry Venables has died at the age of 80 after a long illness. Mr Venables managed England from 1994 to 1996, leading them to the semi-finals of Euro 96. He won the FA Cup with Tottenham and led Barcelona to the Spanish League title. His family say we're totally devastated by the loss of a wonderful husband and father. And you can get more on all of our stories on our website, gbnews.com.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affects us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
News.
Good afternoon. If you've just tuned in, where have you been? Welcome on board. I'm Nana Akua. It's coming up to 37 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel, live on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, lots of you have been getting in touch with your views. We had loads of things to talk about today. We're talking about the war. Israel-Hamas. Adrian says there are two wars, the propaganda war, which Israel is losing, thanks to the mainstream media, particularly the BBC, what's it always put there, and the Met. And the other is the military war at the moment. It's a stalemate, but Israel will win. Thank you for that, Peter. And he said Israel will, once they have hostages home as well. Graham says... Ian says Israel have a powerful incentive to win, as losing means losing their country. And Les says, for every Hamas terrorist taken out, sadly, there'll be 1,000 ready to take their place. We'll keep your thoughts coming. But let's continue with the Great British Debate this hour, because I'm asking, 50 days since Hamas struck, who is winning the war as Israel and Hamas exchange hostages and prisoners? Many fear that the focus on the freed hostages and therefore the ceasefire will mean that Hamas will somehow survive the war even after the atrocities committed on October 7th. But is restraint really the best policy when dealing with a militant terrorist group? And surely this is exactly what Hamas wants. So can Israel still hope to defeat them? So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking 50 days since Hamas struck, who is winning the war? Well, let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly, and also broadcaster and author Christine Hamilton. Danny Kelly.
Well, look, whilst Hamas have the hostages, they're in control because Israel wants those hostages back. There are lots of different nationalities as well. There's quite a few American.
20 Americans, apparently.
Is that right? So, and then there's obviously soldiers that have been kidnapped. So whilst Hamas... Listen, I'm not an expert on war strategies, but I would argue that whilst you have something of great value, you are in control. Whether that actually translates to winning, there's a difference. So I suppose at the moment, Hamas are in control of the war.
But some people might say that the thing that is of great value, and obviously they care about their people, but what is of value is actually the land. And Israel, this is what they're fighting for, and Israel have the land. So if you're on that premise, in your view, surely it might mean that Israel... Depends what you place as the highest value.
Sure, but your rationale is based on Israel staying there. So Israel, it's only going to be...
But they're still there, I mean...
Correct, because it's still ongoing. But if it's a permanent fixture, then that's something geopolitically, that's something that's going to really ignite regional tensions. But at the moment, day 50, Hamas are in control, in my opinion. Israel have got boots on the ground. Yeah. But whilst you have Hamas have got a great set of cards to play. And they're doing it in a methodical...
But what about the prisoners, though, and the people who have been released? Because in a sense, you could say that those would almost... They're not hostages because they haven't been taken in any way by Israel. They are prisoners or people who are being detained. But you could, seeing as Hamas are equating those to hostages, then, in a sense, Israel have plenty of prisoners. Christine?
Well, I mean, on paper, Israel should walk it. I mean, they've got 550,000 troops. 20 times stronger than Hamas, who have 25,000. So, on paper, army for army, as it were, but it isn't as simple as that, as you say, because Hamas have the whip hand with those hostages, and America is putting pressure on Israel. Israel is having to weigh up using the force that they've got. They could wipe Hamas out, basically. Difficult to get the leaders who, of course, live abroad in luxury, but they could effectively wipe Hamas out. But the cost of doing that would be enormous in terms of civilian lives and worldwide opprobrium. At the moment, the world generally is with Israel.
Do you think?
I think so, generally speaking. Certainly, let's say this country, there are thousands... Yes, the West... Oh, I'm sorry, yes, the Western world. There are thousands marching right now, as we sit here in London, against anti-Semitism. So the Western world, but that could turn if civilian casualties get worse and worse. It's a very tricky game that Israel is playing.
I wonder whether you're correct. And the reason that I say that is the French Prime Minister, what's his name? That annoying little French
idea.
fellow.
He won't be there much longer. Never mind.
Whose wife's a lot older. I've forgotten the guy's name.
It's gone from my name as well.
What's his name?
I can't remember his name.
Macron.
Macron. That's how I remember it, yeah.
He even said a couple of weeks ago, he said, look, will Israel stop? And I'm paraphrasing lazily here. I wish I'd got the quote. Israel have got to stop killing babies and innocent people. Now, he's the leader of one of the Western... one of the West great countries. He said that, I promise you. Paraphrasing lazily, but that's the gist of it.
No, but absolutely, that's what they've got to weigh up, is that view... public opprobrium, worldwide opprobrium, against the strength that they've got to wipe them out.
Don't forget one of the oldest democracies on planet Earth, which is the great British democracy. You've got leader of the opposition dividing their own MPs. I'm not convinced the Western world is as robustly behind Israel as people think.
He actually said Macron calls on Israel to stop killing Gaza's women and babies.
There you go.
So that's what he said, yeah.
I still think, basically, they want to be on the side of Israel. I mean, Hamas, it was a terrorist attack. Israel are the innocent party in this war. They didn't start it, Hamas started it. So any right-thinking person should be on the side of Israel.
But some people argue that the war started well before this.
Well, I know.
But then, you know, Israel...
It's been going on for, what, decades and decades?
Well, no, centuries, actually.
Centuries.
I mean, from the history that I saw, that actually Jewish people were on the land, or that is seen as Israel, in 3000 BC. That's what I'd studied. But, you know, ultimately, in the Bible, it says we are merely stewards of the earth anyway, so nobody really owns any land. You're only on it for a period of time. It's a shame that there can't be some sort of agreement.
It's a very delicate balancing act. They've got to play it day by day, and We'll see. But, yeah, you're right. Hamas have the whip hand because they've got those hostages in mind.
And as soon as all the hostages are freed, then Israel can go in mob-handed.
I don't think they ever will.
But there was a point where people had literally given up any hope of the hostages being alive, and that's, you know, and people had, even the families had accepted that. But then, of course, when they realised that some people were alive, then that's when the tactics started slightly changing. They started putting a lot of pressure on her neck.
It's like...
What about that Scottish guy? The Israeli Scottish guy who went through the emotions of saying, I'm glad that she's dead so that she doesn't have to experience this. And then the emotion of possible, actually, she may not be dead. And then he thinks, OK, great, she's not dead. And then he just seen it on the telly now, running towards her father's arms.
It's incredible.
Can you imagine the emotions of that guy?
Oh, look, if you're watching now on TV,
I know.
Oh, there it is.
How amazing.
Not him, but I think it was just...
The one
that's him in the background.
The one
and
before,
the thing is, his wife died of cancer many years ago, so he's been raising that child since the age of 2.
Look there.
So it's really sad.
It's a remarkable roller coaster.
Beautiful, beautiful. I'm so glad to see them reunited.
Oh, look at it.
But let's see what the viewers think, because this show's nothing without them. Let's welcome our great British voices, your opportunity to be on the show. Tell us what you think about the topics we're discussing. Let's go over to... Where should we go? Should we go to Kidderminster?
The home of carpets.
The home of carpets.
The mat's back, hooray.
Let's speak to John Reid. He's there in Kidderminster. John, speak to us. What do you think, in your view? Do you think that Danny and Christine are right? They're saying that because of the hostage situation, that Hamas have the upper hand in this war?
Well, I think it's very easy to look at any war, Nana, and decide who's going to be the winner and who's going to be the loser in military terms. But actually, nobody wins, do they? Well, lots of people die. In this case, thousands have already died. Really, the only people who win are the manufacturers of the armaments, the people who make the bombs and the guns and the tanks and all the stuff, and countries buy it all up and send it out there to help. I don't think any war anywhere is winnable in the real sense of the word, because by the time you get to a result, so many people have died, it can't possibly be fair. So I don't think in the 50 days we can decide who is winning this war any more than we can any other war. So I'm sorry, I tend to agree with both of your guests this week, which is quite a change.
Well, it was good to hear a completely different view, and we appreciate that. Thank you very much, John. John there in Kidderminster. Always a pleasure. He's our great British voice. This is GB News. Welcome aboard. If you just tuned in, it's just coming up to 46 minutes after 4 o'clock. We had quite a few of your views coming in. I did a little monologue earlier about the trans issue, and Lucia says Stonewall is the problem. It has its tentacles in almost every institution in the UK. We were talking about who do you trust in terms of who you're going to vote for when it comes to anything at all. Alan says, we're talking about immigration. Alan says, you asked who do we trust, Labour or Tory? I voted Tory for 5 decades. I don't trust them anymore. I trust every other party even less, and Labour least of all. And let's not forget, Les says, let's not forget the Green Levy, added to all energy bills, scrap the lot. Well, that's what they think. What do you think? GBNews at GBNews.com. On the way, I'll be speaking to Israeli government spokesperson on the ongoing hostage negotiations with Hamas. First, let's get some weather.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. It's still rather cloudy, staying unsettled over the next few days, and temperatures starting to fall further as well. Low pressure dominating the weather pattern at the moment, bringing some brisk winds to eastern areas. This low pressure moves away, allowing brief respite before then further weather systems move in through the middle to end of next week. This evening time, a lot of cloud across the UK, outbreaks of rain, 1 or 2 heavier bursts possible. Temperatures dropping under clear skies across parts of Scotland, a patchy frost here, but showers feeding in from the northeast. Elsewhere, lots of cloud, outbreaks of rain. It will keep temperatures up, so a milder night than of late, generally holding up between 5 and 9 Celsius. But that means England, Wales, Northern Ireland will start off cloudy, outbreaks of rain. This slipping slowly south-eastwards as we go through the day, allowing brighter skies to follow across parts of Northern Ireland, western Scotland, later western fringes of England and Wales. The east staying breezy with showery outbreaks of rain, which could be heavy at times, turning wintry over the higher ground of Scotland. And temperatures dropping as the day goes on, generally into single figures as the winds turn around to a northerly direction. Then into a Tuesday, it's a cold, frosty start, some fog patches first thing, and then a brighter, drier day for many. There will be some wintry showers across the north, and then the next few days temperatures continue to fall, overnight frost and fog, and the risk of some hill snow too.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affects us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only three people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Akua, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, 51 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. Now, in breaking news, Israeli Defence Forces say that the Red Cross has today received 14 Israeli hostages and 3 foreign nationals who are being held captive by Hamas. In exchange, Israel has agreed to free a number of Palestinian prisoners. And the exchange comes in the third day of the 4-day truce. So joining me for more on this is the Israeli government spokesperson, Dr. Ophir Falk. Dr. Ophir, where are we with the hostage situation? Because there's another day where they'll release more. How many more do we know that they may release?
Can't hear you.
Yes, I can hear you. So we've had some hostages being released. Tomorrow, another day, they're supposed to release more hostages. How many? And where do we go after that? Sadly, we've lost him. We'll try and get him back, but stay with me. We'll try and get Dr. Ophir Falk back. I'll try and ask him that question again. But let's travel now over to America and have a chat with the host of the Politics People podcast, Paul Dudridge. Let's see, where's my nice little map? I usually have a nice map. No map. I'm so upset. The maps have gone, Paul. Right, so Paul Dudridge, what's been going on? We've had one poll as a second that Trump is ahead of DeSantis. What's happening with Trump and DeSantis? They're wanting him to drop out. What's going on?
Yeah, I want my map back. DeSantis is floundering suddenly. We've had significant members of his team, namely his fundraisers, actually ditching the campaign now. So he really has to pull it all together for January, the Iowa caucuses. What's happened is Nikki Haley, who has been sort of just on the outskirts, and maybe I don't know if she's that familiar to British TV viewers, but she is now in second place in certain polls to Trump. So we have Trump's still 30 points ahead, let's not forget. But in some polls, we've got Nikki Haley at second place and DeSantis down to fourth and sometimes fifth. So this is looking like a lot of the smart money, can't be that smart because they're not supporting Trump, but a lot of the smart money is moving from DeSantis to Nikki Haley because she's seen as a candidate that can actually beat Biden. Some polls are saying she could beat Biden by 10 points and Trump can only beat him by 2 points. So
listen,
there's
Paul,
a shift of money.
Well, listen, stay there, Paul. We might come back to you. I'm going to quickly head back over to Israel and have a chat with Dr. Ophir Falk. We'll come back to Paul in a moment. But so my question to you was, now we've had some hostages released today. Tomorrow, apparently, some more will be released. How many? And then after that, where do we move from there?
Hi, Nana. Thanks for having me. The plan is to get all of our hostages out, to free all of our hostages. There are 240. We plan on freeing all the hostages and to destroy Hamas. Those are the two goals that the War Cabinet directed the IDF, is to destroy Hamas and to free our hostages. And that's exactly what we're doing. We're currently in a pause for humanitarian purposes. We have thankfully been able to free a number of hostages already the day before yesterday and today. And we hope that more hostages will be freed in the very near future.
OK, so tomorrow there should be some more releases. Have they said how many that they will release tomorrow?
Well, they're supposed to release at least 10 per day. At least 10 hostages are supposed to be released every day. And that's the structure of the deal.
What are the hostages saying what conditions they've been under? And are they giving much information as to where they were being held?
Well, I clearly can't provide any details, not about the negotiations or not about what the hostages have gone through. Clearly, they've been held in captivity under hostage for 50 days with this terrorist organization, these savages, this genocidal terrorist organization that waged war on Israel on October 7th. They attacked Israel, killed over 1,000 Israelis, men, women, children. They beheaded children, burnt babies alive, raped women, murdered women. And that's the genocidal terrorist organization that we are going to destroy right now.
What happens after this pause then? Because there's one more day. Hopefully you'll get more hostages. After this, does the war just carry on as it was?
Absolutely, absolutely. This is just a pause, an important pause for humanitarian purposes to get our hostages out. We hope that additional hostages will be released tomorrow and the day after, and every day thereafter. And once the pause is complete, it's a pause in the war, that we will continue the war against Hamas and destroy Hamas. We'll destroy Hamas, demilitarize Gaza, and then de-radicalize Gaza. That's the only way that peace will ever prevail in that region.
Do you think that you'll have much hope of de-radicalisation? Because obviously the Palestinian people would have seen a lot of death and destruction on their side as well.
Absolutely. I think there is hope for certainly for demilitarization and de-radicalization. That's the only hope of freeing Gaza from these Hamas savages. We're currently in a war between civilization and these Hamas savages. We will destroy Hamas. We will free our hostages. And after that happens, we will be able to demilitarize that entire region so that there won't be any threat on Israel from that region, and also to de-radicalize that area so that children will not, or school children will not be taught to cherish death, but rather to cherish life and not to murder Jews. That's our only hope.
And do you see the answer then as a two-state solution?
Pardon me?
Do you see the answer as a two-state solution?
Well, what we saw on October 7th is that these Hamas savages don't want a two-state solution. They want a final solution. And we're going to make sure that that doesn't happen. The Jewish people have been here for 4,000 years. We're going to continue to be here. We're going to continue to thrive. Israel is a modern miracle. And we always have our hand stretched out to peace, to anybody who really wants peace with Israel. Just 4 years ago, or less than 4 years ago, we managed to have peace deals with 4 different Arab countries. A few people could believe that could happen, and we were hopeful that additional more peace agreements will occur here in the region, and I'm confident that can happen. The day after Hamas is destroyed, Gaza is demilitarized and de-radicalized.
But if this war goes on for a long time, are you not concerned that actually you may lose the support of some of those other countries around Israel and more countries will start to get involved in the war?
Actually, we were very fortunate to have very strong support from our allies, from the United Kingdom. Thank you for the support from the United Kingdom and the people in the United Kingdom, and from the U.S., bipartisan support from the American people and from the President of the United States. And the countries in the area here are also, they are fully aware, they have no illusions as to who the Hamas is and what should happen to the Hamas.
Well, listen, Dr. Ophir Falk, thank you very much for joining me. Thank you so much for talking to us here at GB News. That is Dr. Ophir Falk. He is a spokesperson for the Israeli government. If you just joined me, welcome on board. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. We're live on TV, online and digital radio. Keep all your thoughts coming. GBviews at gbnews.com or tweet me at GB News. But more to come in the next hour. So it is just coming up to 5 o'clock. Welcome on board. If you just switched on your TV, where on earth have you been? We've got still loads to come. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. Coming up, I'll be speaking to my outside guest now. She is a founding member of Pan's People. Do you remember those? Oh, that was so good. Top of the Pops. There they were. Then, for the Great British Debate, who do you think she is this hour? I'm asking, could richer companies or should richer companies pay poorer countries for the climate disaster? That's if you believe we are having a disaster. But first, let's get your latest news with Aaron.
Very good evening. It is exactly 5 o'clock. Aaron Armstrong here in the GB newsroom. And the breaking news this hour, the Israeli army says the Red Cross has received 14 Israeli hostages and 3 foreign nationals who were being held captive by Hamas. Israel has agreed to free a number of Palestinian prisoners in exchange. Hamas has handed over hostages on each of the first 3 days of a 4-day pause in fighting. In total, the two sides have agreed to swap 50 Israeli hostages for 150 Palestinian prisoners. But Israel says it will extend the truce by a day for every additional 10 captives released by Hamas. Meanwhile, Israel's Prime Minister has been meeting security forces inside northern Gaza. Benjamin Netanyahu received security updates. He spoke with commanders and fighters and visited one of the tunnels discovered by his troops. The Prime Minister told his soldiers, "We have 3 goals for this war: eliminate Hamas, return all our abductees and ensure Gaza does not become a threat to the state of Israel again." An Irish-Israeli girl who was initially feared dead has been reunited with her father following her release by Hamas late last night. Emily Hand was among 17 hostages freed by the terror group yesterday after 50 days in captivity. 13 Israelis, 6 women and 7 children, along with 4 Thai nationals, were transported out of Gaza through the Rafah border crossing. And Amit Solva, chairman of the kibbutz from where Emily was kidnapped, says he's particularly relieved. Meanwhile, the Israeli hostages were taken to hospital upon their release last night to be reunited with their families. And Dr. Itai Pesak says they're doing well.
I am happy to say that despite the fact that the harsh conditions they have been under and the experience of captivity. They did not require any emergent medical intervention. We will keep them here at the Edmond Hillary Safra Children's Hospital for as long as they need, and care for them, help them in their preparation of coming back to their communities.
Well, Boris Johnson's told GB News anti-Semitism is like a virus which lurks beneath the floorboards of Western civilization. The former Prime Minister has been attending a march in central London, standing against anti-Jewish racism. Now, it comes amid concern over rising tensions across the UK, sparked by the conflict in Gaza. Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick says anti-Semitism is a stain on our country. It is moral decay. Enough is enough. And Boris Johnson told us it's sad the march has to go ahead in the first place.
What we're all doing here, and the only thing we're really doing, is showing solidarity with Jewish people. And that's necessary because since October the 7th, I'm afraid there's been a very peculiar response in many parts of the world, including, I'm sad to say, in London. And what we've seen is I'm afraid the re-emergence of anti-Semitism and a failure to focus on the appalling terroristic acts of Hamas.
And US President Joe Biden is speaking. He's addressing the media right now about Israeli negotiations and the latest release of hostages. Let's listen in.
For every 10 hostages released, we extend another day. So I'm hopeful this is not the end. It's going to continue. But we don't know. And but I get a sense that all the players in the region, even the neighbors who aren't and have been directly involved now, are looking for a way to end this so the hostages are all released and Hamas is completely, how can I say it, no longer in control of any portion of Gaza.
And do they have control of all of the hostages, or are there still other militant groups that you have to deal with?
We think there are probably other militant groups, but we're not certain.
Mr. President, how is Abigail doing? What's her physical condition? Do you have any information?
I haven't gotten that information. I just wanted to let you know immediately. They were going across into Egypt, as you recall. That was the route. But an older, non-American, elderly woman is very sick and was in need of immediate medical help. So they arranged to cross directly into Israel to be able to take her to a hospital. All I know is that she has been held. I don't know. I haven't seen a photograph. I've just been in communication with my team. But she is safely ensconced in Israel. But there's a lot more work to be done.
How many days would you like to see the pause go on for?
I would like to see us move to a point where we were able to, well, let me put it this way. I'd like to see the pause go on as long as prisoners kept coming out. All right, thank you all so very much. I know, we have to call you. I know you say, what's he calling me with only 10 minutes or so notice? I said, that's a notice.
We're just going to pull away from Joe Biden there. He was, of course, addressing the media, discussing the 4-year-old girl, Abigail Moore Idan, who's been freed today amongst the 17 hostages freed on day 3 of this fragile truce between Israel and Hamas. She turned 4 in captivity, and that was the American president taking some questions from the media. We'll have more on that a little later, but now it's over to Nana.
Thank you, Aaron. 7 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly, and also broadcaster and author Christine Hamilton. Still to come. Each Sunday at 5, I'm joined by a celebrity, a former MP, or someone who's had an extremely interesting career, to take a look at life after the job. We talk highs, lows and lessons learned and what comes next on The Outside. And today I'll be speaking to one of the founding members of Pan's People, who in the 1960s danced on Top of the Pops with the likes of David Bowie, Stevie Wonder, all the way from the West Country. She'll be joining me in the studio very shortly. Then, for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, as COP28 approaches, should richer countries pay for poorer countries for climate change? As COP28 starts on Thursday, one of the arguments being made online is for richer countries who have apparently had more impact on the global population to pay poorer countries that are impacted. As ever, you can get in touch, email gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at GBNews. Right, so every Sunday at 5, I'm joined by a celebrity, a former MP, or someone who's had an extremely interesting career to take a look at life outside the job. We talk highs, lows and lessons learnt and what comes next on The Outside. Now today, my mystery guest is the co-founder of the dance group Pan's People, who throughout the height of the band's career danced with the likes of Tom Jones, Michael Jackson and all the like. In the 1980s, she co-produced 2 West End shows, as well as forming Dance Attic Studios in Fulham, used by many West End productions, dancers and performers. Now living in Wiltshire with her second husband, she currently teaches and dances throughout the West Country with the mantra, "It's never too late to dance." Who do you think she is? The legend Dee Dee Wild. Welcome, Dee Dee.
Thank you, Nana. I'm so excited because I watch GB News all the time, and
wonderful.
to see you in person. And what a glam lady you are.
I love that orange and that necklace.
Thank you. Well, I'm very much a colourful person, so I would wear colour.
And I love dancing, I've got to be honest, because it keeps you alive, it keeps you vibrant.
It does, absolutely. I mean, it's terribly good health-wise, also mentally, because when I'm with my girls dancing, we're learning routines all the time, and even I go wrong, and it's very good for that. And also with my ladies, some of them don't have partners and whatever, so there's this enormous camaraderie, and we call ourselves the dance family, but the name we go under is the Wild Bunch.
The Wild Bunch.
A little bit of an oxymoron, but there you go. Yes, we dance all over the place in the country, doing festivals, and we've done shops, we've done fates, we've done even television with Dermot O'Leary and various people.
Maybe you should do a Christmas dance for us at GB News, because I think our audience
I'd love it.
Love that.
Well, I could come in and put them through their paces.
Yeah, no, I'll come to see you, and we'll take a crew and come and see you guys dance.
Oh, will you? Because
I think we should.
Yeah, I do Christmas. I always, every year, do a Christmas dance, and then everybody gets a little present from me.
I think that's fabulous. Now, I don't want to ask how old you are, because you look so fabulous.
I'm 77.
You look fantastic.
There's no point me lying about my age, because everybody knows Pan's started in the 60s, though we were very much as well a 70s dance group, because our biggest fame, of when everybody knew about Pan's, a little bit like Girls Aloud and the Spice Girls, is actually from 70 onwards, really.
Which one is you on there? Is that you and the blonde one there? Because we're watching on the screen.
Yeah, that's me.
There
I am.
got dark hair.
There's Babs.
Look at that.
And Louise and Cherry and Ruthie. But, you know, the saddest thing is there's only Babs and I left.
Oh, wow.
They've all gone.
That's
I
so
mean,
sad.
showbiz does take its, toll on people. And so Babs is up in north of London, looking after grandchildren and I don't know what else, and I'm in the West Country.
And does Babs still dance?
No, she doesn't. I'm the only one.
You're the only one, but the thing is, it's the body as well, keeping it agile and
Absolutely.
moving.
I always say to my girls when we do pelvic thrusts and things, I said, you've got to get a really nice flat stomach.
You have got a flat stomach.
I have,
still.
yes. I have. I mean, I was about 7.5, 8 stone in those days, and I'm now 9. But I think as you get older, especially me, I've got such a tiny face that you've got to put on a bit of weight. But, I couldn't be without my dance, Nana. I wake up in the morning, I think, oh, yeah, I'm going to do my class today. Exciting.
Well, that's all part of it. That's what keeps you looking so fabulous and keeps you so
it does.
fit.
Keeps me.
So, Pan's People, how did it start? How did you become?
Yeah, well,
you're a founding member.
I am a founder member, yes. Basically, it started, dare I say, back in 1966. I was in a group of dancers called the Beat Girls. We were doing television for a man called Gary Cockrell, and this was in Soho at the Dance Centre. And one Christmas, he said to me, I want you to go to Bournemouth and I'm going to pay you 7 and 6. In those days, there wasn't our decimal money.
Was that a lot? It wasn't.
No. So, I mean, it was literally not even as much as £1, I don't think. And he wanted us to go there over Christmas, and we all said no. And so that day, on December the 8th, 1966, we walked out. And Babs and Flick and I sat in a little studio in Soho where a lady who used to make our costumes owned it. And we were there all night. After about 4 bottles of wine, we decided... we decided that Dionysus Darlings was going to be out of the window. And Pan was the god of dance and music, fertility, love. And he had 6 handmaidens.
And that's what it is, I see. Yeah. So Dionysus was your...
Yes. Yes, funny enough, years later, when I founded the Dance Attic in Fulham, I have actually got Dionysus and Neptune on either side of this listed building.
Wow. Yeah. That's a wonderful, great name as well.
Yes.
A good idea to take that. So if you were to think of your highlight, one of your biggest moments of Pounds People, because you've met people like Michael Jackson... Jackson 5. What was Michael Jackson like?
Michael Jackson was the most beautiful, lovely little boy with a broad nose. And I mean, the fact that he's had that all taken away, he was such a beautiful little boy. And also wonderful singer. And then he was with the Jackson 5. Yeah. And... I remember them coming into the studio. Whenever a big star came to the studio, there'd be sort of a magnetism about the place. And I remember the Jacksons 5 arriving, and there was Michael Jackson. I don't know how old he was, must have been about 10, 11 or something. But so pure and so sweet, with this incredible voice. Yeah. And that was a big moment. And I think meeting Stevie Wonder, because Stevie Wonder has always been my idol. I've loved him. And, of course, all Pans, we only ever danced, most of the time, to Tamla Motown. So all our dances, and Flick, Flick, our choreographer, was totally inspired by Tamla Motown and those wonderful songs.
But you could dance. I mean, back in the day, people really danced.
Though we could, but if you sort of compare us to Strictly today, I mean, some of the things, the knots they tie themselves in. I mean, having watched Angela Rippon at 79 dancing on Strictly, I think to myself, could I do that?
I would love you to do that.
I don't think I could.
I think they should put you on.
I don't know about that. Oh, no, I don't know about that. But, I take my hat off to her. I mean, this is what I think is so great, is, you get to a certain age and it's so important to keep going. And, in fact, it doesn't have to be dance, but exercise. And, you're just getting to see people, meet people, be social in these situations. And, of course, for me, that's what I have with my girls.
Yeah, I love exercise. I love dancing.
Yeah, I love it.
Now, you've done quite a few things, so not just Pounds People. What happened to you after that? Because that kind of disappeared.
Well, yes, the trouble is we used to wear these incredibly high shoes, rather like yours, but with thick heels, and we had to dance in them. And, of course, I ruined my ankle. So I eventually left. And I have to say the first few years were quite difficult because I, suddenly from being a star or being in the public eye, suddenly you're not. But I did get married at that time. Yeah. I married an army officer called Andrew Corbett-Berter at that time. And then after that, I just took any job that was coming along.
Did you have children?
Yes, I had Alexander, who's Alexander Corbett-Bercher, who's 43 coming up. Oh, wow. And my son, my son, who was in the army, and my daughter, who's 39, Poppy. Oh. And I started this studio. It's something I always wanted to do, to start a big dance studio so other aspiring dancers could come and dance. And I started the Dance Attic, which is now one of the largest dance studios in the whole of London. But I don't run it now. My children run it.
Oh, that's lovely, isn't it?
Yeah.
You've worked with disabled people as well?
Sorry?
You've worked with quite people with disabilities and stuff like that as well?
Yes, not a lot, because in my day when we danced, we didn't really. It wasn't the same then, Nana. But obviously, what I actually am aware of is that now, if you have got a disability, you can do anything. You can dance, even if you're in a wheelchair. You can dance, and I think that's wonderful because it gives everybody an equal opportunity.
So you have a second... You're married again?
I'm married again to Henry Marsh, who was... there was a band back in the 70s called Sailor, and they had 2 enormous hits, Girls, Girls, Girls and A Glass of Champagne. And Henry was part of that group. And I met him on Top of the Pops, actually.
Oh, really?
Years and years ago, but we weren't interested in each other. And I was married. I mean, no, I wasn't. I was almost married, not quite, and to my first husband. And then we met again a long, long time later, back at the millennium.
And that's him. Is that him there with you?
Yes.
In the picture?
Yes, there's
with your
Henry.
dogs.
Yeah, there he
look,
is.
Isn't that lovely?
There's my man.
You're listening.
He's sitting out in the car park at the moment.
Is he really waiting
and
for
he's
you?
now a composer. He does lots of music.
So what happened to your first husband? Where did he go?
Unfortunately, he died.
Oh, no.
Yes, but he ran the Dance Attic, my studio, with my children for many years, and he was in the army, and it was rather funny. People used to come in and see this ex-army officer selling leotards and bras and knickers in the shop.
Sounds great. Sounds great. So what are you doing now then?
Well, I dance all the time because it keeps me going. And as I said, with my group, we do various shows. Not so many since the COVID, but we try to sort of go out and do shows and things. And also, the other thing, I do the odd lecture as well. And but writing is one of my passions.
Okay.
My brother was, I had a twin brother called Stuart, who was a very well-known New Age author. And my mad Italian mother was a writer. So it's something I've sort of got into. I've written loads of children's books. I've got a book here, yes.
What's that?
Well, I'm known for my malapropisms. I get them all wrong. I get all my words all wrong. And when Henry and I were getting married, we were going through our vows, and they said, you know, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may now kiss. We both said the dog at the same time. So that's for you.
Oh, thank you very much, Dee Dee.
And it's got loads of different things that I've said.
Well, listen, if people want to find out what you're doing, do you have a website? Are you doing anything socially or not so much?
No, do you know something? I wanted to do a podcast, but try to find something.
You will do one.
Yeah, I would like to.
Dee Dee, it's such a pleasure. I could talk to you for ages, but unfortunately I haven't got ages because I've got to move on. But this is the fabulous Dee Dee Wild. She's an absolute legend from Pans.
Fabulous. Nana as well.
How amazing to meet her as well. What an inspiration. I can't believe how old you are. 77.
Yes. Thank you. Cheers.
Well, listen, that's definitely an advert for dancing. If you love dancing, then, you know, or you're thinking of getting back into it, get into it.
Yes.
So, of course, that's Dee Dee Wild. She's a dancer, co-founder of Pans People back in the day. It's just coming up to 20 minutes after 5 o'clock. Coming up, Supplement Sunday, discussing some of the news stories that caught our eye this week. But up next, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, should richer companies pay poorer countries for climate change? That's on the way.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GBNews.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I. So you want higher taxes? Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portilla. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It is 24 after 5. Welcome if you just joined me. Thank you. It's great to have your company, but you've missed quite a bit. But don't worry, because it's time now for the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, should richer countries pay poorer countries for climate change? COP28, yeah, we're on 28 of these things now. It commences in Dubai this Thursday. How are they going to get there? They're going to fly. China and other developing nations are set to be required to contribute to a fund designed to support countries stricken by climate disaster. Governments will establish a fund focused on addressing loss and damage to restore communities affected by the impacts of climate change, reportedly accelerated by the industrialisation of developing nations. Should richer companies pay poorer countries for climate change? That is the question. Joining me to discuss, Philip Blond, former advisor to David Cameron, Jim Dale, meteorologist, Paul Burgess, climate scientist, Matthew Stadlen, political commentator. So this is the question. Should richer countries pay poorer ones for climate change? I'm going to start with you, Paul Burgess.
Well, the answer to that is no, we shouldn't. I mean, basically, even the IPCC state very clearly that on most of these things, except for warming, actually, on most of these things, there is no discernible difference. In other words, there's no more extreme weather for droughts, floods, hurricanes, etc. It's absolutely a myth. It's just weather. And when you study it, when you study climate, which is weather over a long period, it's simply not true. And in fact, you know, all these COP meetings produce absolutely nothing. They don't give any influence on the CO2 output, which is growing tremendously. I've actually given you some graphs on this.
Jim Dale.
Yeah, good afternoon. Nana, hi, good afternoon. Paul's speaking out of his hosepipe as usual. Climate change is taking place. In terms of the question, should richer countries be paying poorer countries? Well, we're looking at Latin America, we're looking at sub-African countries there in terms of the poorer countries and where they are. And they are the ones that are most affected and have been most affected by climate change. And when we say affected, we're not talking about the kind of thing that might affect, say, the UK, for example, a bit of a flood there and we get over it. This is having no food. This is having no water to drink. So if you take that to its end point, when there's nothing to eat and nothing to drink, when climate change does hit, then guess what happens? It's called climate migration. And those boats that get talked about quite often, well, they're going to be in demand, hell of a demand. And that's why richer countries should contribute commensurately to poorer countries to ensure that they don't fall down.
All right, but before you carry on, though, Jim, just apologise for that, because that's not very nice, telling me he's talking about out of his host pipe. I think that's wrong.
Sorry, say again.
Can you apologise, please, to Paul, because that's not fair, talking out of his hose pipe. That's not acceptable. Come on.
Yeah, that's a petro hose pipe. I think it's absolutely fair. I won't apologise. It's absolutely fair.
Well, I think.
Can I just answer that?
Yeah, go on. You can also
respond
to
that.
Go on.
Yeah, I mean, I make no money out of this appearance. I make no money out of any of my TV appearances at all. It just covers my expenses. I am down personally thousands of pounds. So I don't make any money like you do, Jim, out of this. So when you talk about funding, etc., I'm familiar and friends with many climate scientists, and none of them I know make any money from petro. It is an absolute smear. And if you're going to do this on air, which you do continually, give me the evidence. I appear on air with you all the time.
Okay, well, this apology thing hasn't gone well, so I'm going to go to Matthew Stadlen. Matthew Stadlen.
No, I have to say, I find it extraordinary that Paul says that climate change is a myth and it's not happening, because the we all know, everyone watching and knows, really, in their brains and in their hearts, everyone watching GB News this afternoon.
I just want to say, I think he knows that it's changing, but the way it's changing and what's causing it is
everyone knows that climate change is man-made and that the overwhelming majority of scientific opinion is behind that. And I think it is absolutely... Just look at... I beg people, just go and look at a graph of the world's climate from, say, 1971 till 2021, and it goes like this. It goes like this. There are a few little dips, but it basically goes like... It's a steep hill. And we are in a dangerous situation. Now, it's obviously true now.
That's only 20 years. What you said, the climate graph's over 20 years.
It's 30 years, but we've been getting steadily warmer from the 1950s. We as human beings, of course, we're preoccupied with the horrors of what's going on in the Middle East. Of course, we're preoccupied with the cost of living, rightly so, in this country. That doesn't mean that we can wish climate change away. We have to take it seriously. And in answer to the main question, Nana, of course, richer countries should pay poorer countries. And by the way, if we don't, as your other guest rightly said, we will have many more small boats coming here in the future.
Well, I don't think they're leaving because of climate change. They're clearly leaving here because they get the benefits and they get to be in a hotel, usually 4-star. Philip Blond.
Yeah, I just want to sidestep the debate on whether climate change is happening. From my own position, I think it clearly is. Look, I think that what's happening is to the great advantage of the West, Britain and Europe, because we're asking countries like China that have moved out of the developing framework, who are on course to be, by the middle of this century, the greatest emitter of carbon, to play on an equal playing field for us with trade. What this allows us to do, quite rightly, is set up green tariffs across the EU. It's also been debated in America, where we don't allow unfair competition between our own domestically produced industrial products that are, compared to Chinese products, far less causing of carbon-based pollution, and therefore we get an equitable trade. We're also looking at China. You've got to have sticks as well as carrots. China has 2 plans in place: peak carbon production. It's going to have 300 more coal-fired power stations by the mid-century. 300. So China dwarfs and will surpass America as the biggest historic generator of carbon pollution by mid-century. So what is transformative is actually making China pay, and also making the petrostates pay, rather than just people in the West. And also why we should support this, I'll just make one more remark, is it ensures a more equitable trading arrangement. So our products are no longer competing unfairly against products that don't have to abide by our pollution rules.
Yeah, but Philip, the problem with all of that is that, for example, let's take diesel, which we were told to do things because diesel was a wonderful thing, and, it turned out to be the spawn of Satan. And then it seemed to be that now everyone who's got a diesel car and this and that. So what I'm saying is, whilst we may say that what China is doing is wrong, we might find that something that we've been doing is also wrong and causing damage. And actually, the CO2 isn't the answer. And I just feel that, genuinely, do you think then, I'm going to ask you all yes or no, and it's a yes or no, so I'm going to start with you, Paul, should richer nations pay, yes or no?
No.
OK, Philip, yes or no?
Yes, because
Yes. Jim Dale, yes or no?
Yes.
And finally, Matthew Stadlen, yes or no?
Yes.
Right, thank you so much. Their thoughts. What are yours? Thank you so much to Philip Blond, former advisor to David Cameron, Jim Dale, meteorologist, Paul Burgess, climate scientist, and Matthew Stadlin, political commentator. So what do you think? Should richer countries pay poorer for climate change? This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. On the way, we'll continue with the debate. I'm asking, should they pay? What are your thoughts? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, Christian Hamilton and Danny Kelly. But first, let's get your latest news with Harren.
Hi there, it's 5:32. I am Aaron Armstrong. The Israeli army says 13 hostages are now in Israel, with a further 4 on their way to the Rafah border crossing following their release by Hamas. Israel's agreed to free a number of Palestinian prisoners in exchange. Hamas has handed over hostages on each of the first 3 days of a 4-day pause in fighting. In total, the two sides have agreed to swap 50 Israeli hostages for 150 Palestinian prisoners, but Israel says it will extend the truce by a day for every additional 10 captives released by Hamas. Meanwhile, Israel's Prime Minister has been meeting security forces inside northern Gaza. Benjamin Netanyahu received security updates and visited one of the tunnels discovered by his troops. The Prime Minister told soldiers, "We have 3 goals for the war: eliminate Hamas, return all our abductees, and ensure Gaza does not become a threat to the state of Israel again." Boris Johnson's told GB News anti-Semitism is like a virus which lurks beneath the floorboards of Western civilization. The former Prime Minister has been attending a march in central London standing against anti-Jewish racism. It comes amid concerns over rising tension across the UK, sparked by the conflict in Gaza. And Lee Anderson says allegations he used an opportunity to defect to Reform UK as leverage to secure promotion are simply ridiculous. It comes after an audio recording of the Tory party deputy chairman was leaked to a Sunday newspaper. In the recording, Anderson says he'd been offered a substantial sum of money to join Reform UK. Its leader, Richard Tice, told the BBC it helped Mr Anderson secure his new role. Responding, the Tory MP described the claims as wild accusations and an insult to him and his party. Both Lee Anderson and Richard Tice are hosts with GB News. And you can get more on all of our stories on our website right now, gbnews.com. Now, back to Nana.
Coming up, should the BBC be using taxpayers' money to fund £600,000 a year diversity and inclusivity schemes? But on the way next, we'll be continuing with the British debate this hour, and I'm asking, should richer companies pay poorer funds for climate change?
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these 3.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only three people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Akua, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I. So you want higher taxes? Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon. This is GB News. Don't forget you can download the GB News app where you can get all the shows free, or why not watch us live on YouTube or catch up with my monologue. It'll be out there. I'm Nana Akua. We are live and it's time now for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, should richer countries pay poorer countries for climate change? COP28, yes, we're on 28. It's the 28th one now. It's commencing in Dubai this Thursday. China and other developing nations are set to be required to contribute to a fund. I don't know whether they're actually going to be going, though, because last time China didn't and they weren't present. But this fund is designed to support countries stricken by climate disaster, and governments will establish the fund focused on addressing loss and damage to restore countries, communities that are affected by the impacts of climate change, which reportedly has been accelerated by the industrialisation of developing nations. But I suppose in that industrialisation, there's been a lot of benefit for all of the countries as well. So what do you think? Should richer countries pay poorer countries for climate change? Let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly and broadcaster and author Christine Hamilton. Danny Kelly, I'm going to start with you.
Well, I don't know if any figures have been bandied around, touted. We're no doubt talking about billions and billions of pounds. And then, of course, if the government's going to start throwing billions of pounds towards developing countries affected by climate change, then that shortfall needs to be made up by working-class families. And working-class families themselves may not be able to afford to pay even more dough to help out, if you like, third-world countries affected by, quote-unquote, climate change. So until figures are actually put on the table so we can see how much it's going to cost each individual, I noticed with the panel, you know, the people who were saying, yes, we should do, the very middle-class bunch of people who no doubt can afford to pay a few bob more. I'm thinking about the tough working-class individuals watching this television show, listening to on the radio from impoverished parts of the northwest, where I'm from, in the Midlands, and they'll be thinking, why the hell should I pay more? I can barely afford to put my own heating on. Why should I pay? And we don't know how much, but it's going to be billions of pounds.
And also, when we say poorer nations, you've got to remember that in some of those poorer nations, there's a lot of corruption. And actually, at the top of the tree, the people at the top of the tree are fine. It's the very, very poor people who aren't fine. Yeah. And there'll be some people in the middle. But just like this country, we have people who are poor as well. Christine?
Well, I mean, the whole premise is wrong. We take the moral high ground because we export all our manufacturing to places like China. So we can say, oh, we're getting our emissions down, but all that's happening is the emissions that we would otherwise if we kept our manufacturing industry going. And China is now responsible for 30% of global output. India is responsible for 7%. We are responsible for 1%. If the UK was wiped off the face of the earth tomorrow, in a few months' time, China would have outputted all our output. So do you see what I mean? We are an absolute minnow, and we are impoverishing ourselves so that these climate change activists can take the moral high ground. It's absurd.
If we were suddenly obliterated from the map, then China's emissions would go down because they wouldn't be supplying
They wouldn't be
us.
selling stuff. I know.
Which is the irony of it.
But China has absolutely no intention whatsoever of helping anybody else out. Their sole aim, and in a way who can blame them, is to raise the standard of living for their people and catch up
they're quite advanced
with industrialisation.
I think they're bringing their emissions down quite considerably. Danny?
Do you know...
China, no.
I've been watching loads of documentaries on TV, you know, travel shows, where you go to, like, parts of South Asia, you go to big cities in India and Pakistan, and they're not there talking about climate change, but they're just there talking about maybe tourist things or whatever. And you want to see the amounts of cars that are just driving around, tuk-tuks. You want to see all of the...
I know.
You know, and Mayor Khan's charging you 12.5 nicker to come down in, like, a 2015 plate Focus diesel. You want to prioritise these areas, rather than levying and charging us more through our tax to actually help them out once the problem has actually happened. We should start putting some sort of global collective pressure on these countries, because it's going to be too late. If the climate scientists are right, it's going to be too late. The horse has bolted.
Well, what can we do anyway? We can't do
I don't know what you can do.
Well, they go on and on and on, these people, these climate nutters. CO2 is responsible for 1% of the atmosphere. You would think it was 99% of the atmosphere, the way they go on about it. China isn't going to do it, so we can... COP28 or COP 128 or whatever they are now, well, we'll get there fairly soon.
They'll probably stop counting when they get to 100.
They can shout and bleat as much as they like. They won't get anything out of China.
I'm just going to read this out, because this is from Gordon, who says what a lot of people are probably thinking. He says, "Hi, Nana. Everyone I know is sick of people saying everyone I know. They are like robots. The climate is changing, but your panel never admit that more people... die from cold than heat. They never mention benefits of climate changing. This is, of course, the four-box panel, not these guys.
Yeah.
They never mention benefits of climate changing. More carbon is thrown into the atmosphere by volcanic eruptions on land and under the sea. The climate scientists are as bad as the COVID scientists. Their computer modelling is based on insufficient data and guesswork." Gordon, thank you for that.
Well, the other problem is, the deep underlying problem that starts all this, is that the global population has doubled in the last 50 years, I think, and it was set to probably double again in the next 50 years. That's the basic problem. So what are we going to do about that?
I think we're going to see a millennium bug moment where we're told... You remember the millennium bug?
I remember that.
1999, 2000, all the planes were going to drop out of the sky, all the emergency services wouldn't be able to respond because the computers would implode. I think in the year 2050, and we're all... watching our clocks. I think, you know, January the 1st, 2050, we're... OK, so, right, where is this climate disaster?
I don't know, maybe
where is it? Are we supposed to be underwater now or something?
Well, you probably find a huge windmill in the back of your garden or something. Everyone's going to have one of those awful noisy things.
I mean, climate's changed over the millennia. We have the one everybody quotes is that the Thames froze over in medieval times.
And there were hippopotamus, apparently. But listen, this shows nothing without you and your views, apparently, in the Thames. Let's welcome some of our great British voices, their opportunity to be on the show and tell us what they think about the topics we're discussing. I've got three of you. I'm going to start with David Baum. He's there in Watford. David, should we be paying should the richer nations be paying poorer nations for the climate change? David's in the middle.
How can I say this? Not a chance. All that would happen is this would go the same way as humanitarian aid. Very few people would become billionaires and the rest would have poverty. Can I remind everyone, in 2006, Al Gore predicted and won an Oscar and all these awards that by 2015, Watford would be by the sea because the ice caps would have melted. It would be a disaster. And every year, someone touts out another one, another year ahead, another year ahead. Yes, we have global catastrophe. But if you just go swimming, say in the Med, people are dumping plastic in the oceans. Clean up the air first. The air is cleaner. I remember Biafra when there was disasters in the 60s and the 70s. It wasn't global warming. It was man-made.
Well, that's the problem, isn't it? People seem to talk about the climate, and as long as the climate's fine, let's not worry about the giant windmills in the sky that are killing all the birds, and then the things, you know, all these awful pylons that are going to kill a load of animals. As long as the climate, as long as the air is fine, let's go to Philip Hoy in Hertfordshire. Philip.
Hi, Nana. Well, you talk about whether or not richer countries should pay. I know what China's going to do. They're going to say, well, we're already doing the Belt and Road initiative, which basically means they put money into countries and then they try and take the countries over. I've seen it myself. I saw it in Sudan. I mean, that's what they're going to do. But they're going to say, well, we are giving money to poorer countries. I don't believe in it. I don't think they should do it. I got to be honest with you, with your climate scientist, Paul, he's the only one on the panel I agreed with. I think he's absolutely right. And the question that needs to be asked is, why do they always start talking about the rise in temperature, but they start from, I think it's 1610 or something like that. They never mention the fact that the climate had changed by 4 degrees, dropped by 4 degrees up to 1610, and we only start measuring from then. It's a thing.
It does seem a bit. It is, you know, the modelling doesn't. They're not very good at modelling by the looks of it. Adrian Gell, he's there in Shropshire. Adrian.
Oh yeah, okay. So yeah, I mean, I look at this and I think to myself, why on earth are we always being punished for the fault of others like China and the US? Yeah, we do have our net zero target of 2035, which I think we'll probably stick to. But why should the British taxpayer be forced to fork out when we already give a lot of the poorer countries foreign aid anyway, which actually seems to go into the back pockets of a number of irresponsible, corrupt regimes. We've got enough problems with our own incompetent politicians in our own country already, right across the spectrum, without having to worry about foreign politicians and other people's economies, when actually we are trying our best, but actually, the likes of China and the United States really couldn't give us stuff.
Well, listen, thank you so much, David, Philip and Adrian, for their thoughts. Those are my Great British Voices. But what do you think? Should richer countries pay poorer for climate change? Now, I love this because Peter, thank you very much. He says one thing, and in the title of the email, it says, skint. We are all skint. Oh, Peter, it's so good. Right. So first, though, but let's... this is a little story that caught my eye, so I wanted to chat with you and my panel, because according to the Freedom of Information request, the BBC have been requested to have spent over £600,000 on diversity and inclusion. Yes, the BBC expects the production teams it works with to be at least 20% diverse, and critics say that it's an example of wasting taxpayers' money. Danny Kelly, I've got to start with Danny Kelly, because the
15 years. Well, I lost my job because I was a 50-year-old white lad. 2 months before I lost my job, I was told by my line manager that the BBC in London said that the audience of Radio WM, and I quote, were too old and too white, and the lineup at WM were too old and too white. I was the only freelance radio presenter.
This is radio. Does it matter what we look like?
See you. You can't see what colour you are. But
all that
to be fair, your boss isn't here to defend himself. But we'll take you at your word.
I've told it 1,000 times, and the BBC have never written to me saying cease and desist.
That's
it's
okay.
True. I promise you, it's true. Now, I lost my job. They diversified the lineup, and the figures have gone through the floor. The BBC, unfortunately, is no longer a meritocracy. It's a box-ticking organisation.
Christine Hamilton.
Well, I think the figure is 20%. They say that it has to be 20% diverse. The country isn't 20% diverse, so that's a ridiculous figure. £600,000. Actually, when you look at that alongside what they pay Mr. Lineker, it actually doesn't seem to be a monumental amount of money. Yes, I agree.
It's a waste of money.
Of course, it's a waste of money, but I'm slightly surprised it's actually as small as it is.
And I think there's obviously some other thing that's not going on. I remember they had June Sarpong, who's their diversity star, and she was on over 240 or 260 grand. She was there 3 days a week. For what? For what exactly? I don't know what
Just to tick a box.
But it's box ticking as far as I see. Yeah, but anyway, so what do you think, honestly? I feel sad for the BBC. They seem to be heading down some sort of awful... Well, I won't say.
Sad for the BBC?
I feel sorry for them, yeah.
I like the BBC.
Because I think there's a place for them, but I think all of this nonsense just... Everyone's losing the thoughts of the BBC. But now it's time for Supplement Sunday, where my panel and I discuss some of the other stories that caught their eye. Danny, yours is about Oxfam worker. Yeah, go on.
Let me tell you, if anyone's thinking about sitting in a bath of cold baked beans for 24 hours to raise 500 quid for Oxfam, just listen to how much they paid one member of staff. £349,000 to one employee in a 12-month calendar year. Now, I understand that people need to... Because he is remunerated in such a manner that he's top of the
That's his salary.
349 grand.
Wow.
Yeah, so just have a little think about next time you're sitting in cold baked beans or you're cycling from Land's End to John O'Groats. They pay people £350,000.
That's 340 grand or so. That's unbelievable.
Plenty of other charities who do similar things that I would always support in advance of Oxfam.
But then they would argue they need to pay the top money because they need the top people.
But it's not the top money.
Well, actually...
This person isn't the top.
That's just too much.
It's not the chief of Oxfam who gets that.
The boss
he gets
of Oxfam
less.
gets paid slightly less, and his name is, and Christina's challenged me, Danny, I can get that bit right, Skrisgandaraja.
Very good. He might tell you got it wrong. Anyway, Christine,
Well, I had a shock when I opened my paper this morning because I had absolutely no idea. A little quiz for everybody out there. How much is a first-class stamp going to be any minute now?
60p.
Oh, you are so out of touch. Miss Akua.
£1.25.
What?
£1. The Royal Mail is planning a 25% rise in the cost of second-class stamps. They're going to go up to 94p. First-class stamps went up last month to £1.25. I now know why I got half as many birthday cards 2 weeks ago as I normally do.
Did they not send you on the internet?
No. Yeah, they did, but that doesn't count.
Yeah, and they don't get there when they're meant to get there.
No.
As well. So they say it's going to be the next day, and it isn't.
I mean,
the
it's
next day. It's like
who's going to?
They've got to put it on the stamps because fewer people are sending letters.
But who's going to spend £1.25?
Everybody who wants a first-class stamp.
Yeah, well, it doesn't even get there the next day, which is what it's meant to be. It's just ridiculous.
Hey-ho.
Well, listen, lastly, my supplement, and this is a story about stealth taxes, because during the autumn statement, Jeremy Hunt announced that the biggest tax cuts since the 1980s. But as Liam Halligan pointed out, there's 12 stealth taxes, and they're set to make the country an eye-watering £800 worth off per household. And the changes hidden in the small print include increases to a raft of smaller taxes, such as environmental levies, tobacco, vehicle excise, and so on. So is this the latest political spin story that you're hearing from the Conservatives?
It looks like it's sleight of hand, doesn't it? It looks like a magic trick, an illusion.
It's smoke and mirrors, isn't it? I think I'll get the figures out so I get them right. Apparently, the Office for Budget Responsibility, which the government seem to think is a bit of a Bible, the borrowing in March was 115 billion. Now it's only 98 billion, and I think Hunt thought that, oh, right, I've got 17 billion to spend. But he hasn't. It's just that... well, I mean, I do think he thought that.
He's got his sums wrong.
He's got his sums wrong. I mean, you know, and in October... we borrowed 15 billion in 1 month. Now, you know, I can remember the time when if we borrowed 15 billion over a year, we'd have had palpitations. But 1 month, I mean, the whole thing has just got so out of hand.
I know, it's ridiculous. But the Labour Party, I don't think there'll be any worse. Well, listen, on today's show...
Couldn't be.
I've been asking, it's 50 days since Hamas struck Israel, but who is winning the war? According to our Twitter poll, 4% of you say Hamas, 54% of you say Israel, 42% of you say no one. Thank you so much to my panel, Danny Kelly. Danny, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And also to the fabulous Christine Hamilton for joining me today.
Oh, Danny's fabulous too.
It's a fabulous.
No,
Not so much. And thank you to you at home for your company, as ever. I look forward to seeing you next week, same time, same place, 3 o'clock on Saturday. I'll leave you with the weather. Have a good week.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. It's still rather cloudy, staying unsettled over the next few days and temperatures starting to fall further as well. Low pressure dominating the weather pattern at the moment, bringing some brisk winds to eastern areas. This low pressure moves away, allowing brief respite before then further weather systems move in through the middle to end of next week. This evening time, a lot of cloud across the UK, outbreaks of rain, 1 or 2 heavier bursts possible. Temperatures dropping under clear skies across parts of Scotland, a patchy frost here, but showers feeding in from the northeast. Elsewhere, lots of cloud, outbreaks of rain, it will keep temperatures up, so a milder night than of late, generally holding up between 5 and 9 Celsius. But that means England, Wales, Northern Ireland will start off cloudy, outbreaks of rain, this slipping slowly south-eastwards as we go through the day, allowing brighter skies to follow across parts of Northern Ireland, western Scotland, later western fringes of England and Wales. The east staying breezy with showery outbreaks of rain, which could be heavy at times, turning wintry over the higher ground of Scotland. And temperatures dropping as the day goes on, generally into single figures as the winds turn around to a northerly direction. Then into a Tuesday, it's a cold, frosty start, some fog patches first thing, and then a brighter, drier day for many. There will be some wintry showers across the north, and then the next few days, temperatures continue to fall, overnight frost and fog, and the risk of some hill snow too.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with Israel.
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affects us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests, and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.